Chapter 188. She walked to the door and looked inside. Sure enough, she saw that in addition to the messy table and bed, there were human limbs, half-torsos, and heads piled up everywhere in the room. The ground was full of blood, and the thick blood had flowed into a thick layer of dark red. In the corner of the room, a figure was squatting there with its back facing Lin Xiao's door. It was holding something in its hands and eating it with its head down. Kacha kacha. The chewing sound came from its mouth. Lin Xiao saw that its back was arched, and its hair was sticky and messy. Most of the thing in its hands was exposed, and Lin Xiao could see it clearly. It was a human foot, and she could see it clearly from the calf to the sole. Obviously, the part that the zombie was eating was the middle of the thigh. Beside the zombie, there was a human torso that was broken in two. It was a young man. The man's face was covered with blood, and there was a big hole in his head. It seemed that he had been chewed. The man's eyes were wide open, and his mouth was open in pain and horror. His facial features were twisted, and his round eyes almost popped out. His body was cut off from the stomach, and his abdomen was torn into pieces. It was a bloody mess that couldn't be seen clearly. Below the waist, the other parts were thrown to the other side, and there was also a leg missing. Except for the man who seemed to be dead for less than 2 days, the other parts of the body had different lengths of time, and it seemed that this zombie had been classified. It had been a long time, and the bones and limbs that were not fresh or had been chewed were all piled up in the corner of the door. There was a strong and pungent smell of decay, and a bunch of flies were buzzing around. This pile of corpses had been around for at least 1 or 2 months, and some parts of the body that were less than 2 weeks old were scattered everywhere. Only the male corpse next to the zombie was the freshest. The zombie was focused on chewing its food, and its head and upper body were moving. It didn't notice that Lin Xiao had been standing at the door for a few seconds. Lin Xiao stood at the door for a few seconds, and then she took 2 steps back. She stood on a small piece of clean ground without blood, and suddenly appeared. Sensing Lin Xiao's sudden appearance, the zombies that were eating suddenly froze. Then it suddenly turned around, and a strange face that Lin Xiao couldn't recognize appeared in front of him. Like most zombies, this zombie's mouth was wide open. A pair of eyes were filled with eerie darkness, and it was unknown if its nose had been bitten off by other zombies. He could only see 2 nostrils. When it saw Lin Xiao standing outside the door, it immediately opened its mouth and bared its teeth. Facing Lin Xiao, he let out a deep roar. Woo! Roar. Its voice carried a strong killing intent, as if Lin Xiao had run into its territory and would die in its hands. Lin Xiao also saw the strong killing intent in its cold black eyes. Also, because it was chewing on human flesh just now, its mouth, face, and teeth were stained with blood, and there were still some shreds of meat hanging from its teeth. Lin Xiao rolled his eyes and ignored its attack. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, then stepped back and leaned against the guardrail of the corridor, indifferently looking at the zombies. Do you think you can beat me just because you shout louder? Do you think you can roar me to death? The zombie was a little confused by Lin Xiao's calm attitude, seeing that she didn't attack at all. It didn't know how this fellow had the guts to run into its territory. Seeing that Lin Xiao didn't move, it let go of the human leg in its claws. Then it stood up and turned around. Its original appearance was no longer what it used to be. The clumps of hair that were stuck together were not very long. Although it did not cover its face, the bloodstains on its face were similar to the clothes that had been soaked in blood over and over again, and its original color could not be seen. At first glance, it was bloody and dirty and smelly. This zombie had a very strong hostility, judging from the scene here. It had been hunting living people to eat, and it was a regular occurrence. The interval between the people it ate wasn't very long. Lin Xiao looked at the person it just ate, and it seemed to have died yesterday. But the previous breath disappeared a few days ago, and it seemed that it had been caught a few days ago. This zombie could still store food, and it was still alive. Its IQ was a little high. After the zombie turned around, it arched its back towards Lin Xiao, and its eyes stared at her. Its whole body began to slowly emit a layer of faint red smoke, just like Lin Xiao's. More and more red gas came out, and the color became thicker and thicker. Soon it filled most of the space in the room. Lin Xiao didn't know what effect the red smoke had, but seeing that this zombie's ability was actually the same as hers, she looked at the red smoke with some surprise. It was rare to encounter such a strange ability. Lin Xiao saw a lot of Logia's abilities in Lu Tianyu's memory, such as metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. There were also strange ones such as metal, thunder, spirit, and so on. Lin Xiao killed one of the metal attribute a few days ago, and it was a level 5. She also killed one of the spirit attribute when she was in the south. Lin Xiao looked at the zombie that had completely changed its appearance. If it hadn't eaten too many people, she might have let it live for another 2 days. She saw that the red smoke slowly covered the zombie's figure, and the red mist was a little hard to see clearly. Lin Xiao waved his hand and a thick black mist surged out from his palm. Moreover, it rushed towards Hong Yan in a very intelligent manner. The red smoke of this zombie didn't seem to be flexible, and it didn't listen to the zombie's command. It just drifted in the room with the flow of air. When Lin Xiao's black mist rushed out, it quickly rushed into the room, and it spread out as soon as it entered the door, forming a semicircle and covering the red smoke in the room. When the red smoke was touched by the black mist, it immediately melted away. And the speed at which the black mist advanced towards the zombie didn't stop. Roar dash! As soon as Lin Xiao released the black mist, the zombie was keenly aware of the danger. It anxiously roared at Lin Xiao. Seeing that the black mist was rushing towards it so quickly and had even melted the gas it had released, the black mist began to rush towards it. Woo-woo! The red smoke zombie growled in a low voice while slowly retreating. Lin Xiao immediately moved, and her figure disappeared on the spot. She knew that there were 2 windows behind the zombie. She could see it from its retreating movement. It wanted to run away. Lin Xiao knew the power of her black mist, but she didn't expect this zombie's perception to be so strong. It felt danger before it even touched the black mist. And its IQ wasn't low, and it seemed to want to take the opportunity to escape. Only those zombies without IQ would fearlessly rush up to attack when they saw an enemy. But the one in front of her quickly discovered that it wasn't Lin Xiao's opponent, so it wisely chose to escape. However, the enemy it encountered today was Lin Xiao. It was impossible for him to escape now. Chapter 189. As soon as Lin Xiao disappeared, the red smoke zombie panicked. It immediately jumped out of the red smoke through the window. In the next second, a transparent shadow followed behind it and leaped out. It would have been fine if the zombie didn't run, but once it ran, it exposed the back door. As soon as it turned around, Lin Xiao rushed in from outside the door. She instantly passed through the red and black smoke. Just as the red smoke zombie jumped out of the window, Lin Xiao jumped out of the window. As soon as she jumped out, her figure immediately appeared. She swung her claws at the red smoke zombie's neck. The red smoke zombie originally wanted to jump out and jump from one building to another. Because this was the dormitory area, the building behind the window was facing the back of the building. As soon as it came out, it could see the corridor and the rows of dormitory doors of the building behind it. The distance between the dormitory buildings was less than 2 meters. As a zombie, if it jumped out, it could immediately jump into the other building. However, just as it jumped out, before it could reach the corridor of the opposite building, it was cleanly slashed by Lin Xiao's claws in midair. Bang! The red smoke zombie's stiff body smashed into the corridor of the opposite building. Then it immediately smashed into a few pieces and fell to the ground below. Roar, roar, roar. The ground floor was also crowded with zombies, and the red smoke zombie suddenly smashed down. They didn't have much of a reaction. Lin Xiao directly released her aura in midair, and then landed on a flower bed that didn't have any zombies. Roar, roar. After being hit by Lin Xiao's aura, the group of zombies that didn't have any reaction when the red smoke zombie fell to the ground immediately became chaotic. Immediately, there was a commotion, and all of them retreated to the side. In less than 10 seconds, a small empty space automatically appeared around Lin Xiao. She jumped down from the flower bed that was half a meter wide, and then walked towards the corpse of the red smoke zombie that she had cut into a few pieces with her claws. Seeing Lin Xiao's movement, the zombies in the direction that she was walking towards immediately moved away. Lin Xiao walked to the side of the red smoke zombie's corpse. The red smoke zombie's corpse had been split into several pieces. The head was separated from the neck, and the neck was connected to half of the shoulder and arm. However, the other half of the shoulder and arm had been cut off. The other half of the shoulder and arm that had been cut off was also separated from the lower part of the chest. Several scattered pieces fell to the ground. Lin Xiao walked in front of the zombie's head, squatted down, and used his claws to cut open the head. Then he used his fingernails to pry open the skull and dug out the corpse core. When she passed through the zombie's red mist, she felt something. There was a light sweet aroma in the red mist, making her have a slight impulse to indulge in it. Now that she thought about it, she understood what it felt like to be in the red mist. It was confusion. Moreover, this zombie's attack power was actually very low. It didn't even have the slightest resistance against his attack, and was easily cut into several pieces. It seemed that the reason it kept the zombies below was to protect itself. He just didn't expect Lin Xiao to jump over from the top of the building, and the other zombies didn't notice. At this time, Xiaodong also came over. He walked to Lin Xiao's side and looked down at her. Lin Xiao looked at the corpse core in her hand. There was nothing special about the energy inside. She directly threw it into the lake in the space. She stood up and walked out. Xiaodong also followed her out. After walking for about 10 or 20 meters, Lin Xiao walked to the side of a relatively tall factory building. She stopped, turned around and made a gesture to Xiaodong, asking him to wait for her there. She went up to check the direction. Xiaodong looked up at the top of the building and nodded. Lin Xiao walked to the side of the building, where there were rows of air conditioning boxes, and quickly climbed up. In less than 10 seconds, she quickly reached the top of the building. When she reached the top, she found the highest position and climbed up. Standing there, she faced the sky and sniffed around. After sniffing for a long time, she finally smelled something. Huh! Lin Xiao looked in a certain direction in confusion. She faintly felt that there was something in that direction, but it might be because the distance was too far, so she couldn't feel it clearly. She couldn't smell anything, it was too far away. But in her heart, she faintly felt a strange connection with the other side. She didn't know what was going on. She sniffed in other directions, but didn't find any high-level zombies. Looking at the place that gave her the strange feeling, Lin Xiao decided to go there to take a look. Anyway, that direction was in the direction of the city. Lin Xiao turned around and jumped down from the top of the building. Then she directly jumped down from the position she just came up from. He somersaulted twice in the air before landing steadily on the ground. Xiaodong stood at the side and watched her come down before walking over. Lin Xiao looked up at the sun. It was already noon. It was very hot. She walked out of the factory while taking off her coat. She revealed the military vest inside. Although she wasn't sweating, she could feel the heat. Although she would be exposed to the sun if her arms and shoulders were exposed, she would rather be exposed to the wind than her skin wrapped in clothes. As soon as she took off her clothes, Xiaodong was stunned for a moment and then stared at her. Moreover, he was walking beside her. When he turned his head to look, he saw that she was standing beside him. When he turned his head, he saw the two big cats in front of Lin Xiao's chest. Well, although she was wrapped in a military vest, it still couldn't support her body shape. Lin Xiao was wrapping the two sleeves around her waist and was about to tie a knot when she noticed his gaze. She looked up and saw that he was staring at her chest. She looked down. Okay. She forgot to find her underwear. Now she was wearing a tight-fitting singlet, which tightly wrapped around her two big weapons, and the shape of them was completely revealed. There were two more dots. She silently picked up the clothes that she was going to tie to her waist and then draped it over her shoulders. She tied a knot and moved the knot of the sleeves to the back, and moved the fabric of the clothes to the front of her chest. This way it blocked the bulge in front of her chest. After she was done, she looked up and saw that Xiaodong was still staring at her chest. She immediately lifted her leg and kicked him. Xiaodong was kicked and staggered 2 steps to the side before coming back to his senses. He then realized how awkward his expression was just now. He touched his nose and looked at Lin Xiao under the hat and glasses, so he couldn't see her eyes. His mind was still full of what he saw just now. That shape, that scale. He really wanted to touch it. Xiaodong tried hard to kick this thought away, then smiled awkwardly and gave her a thumbs up. Lin Xiao was originally close to him, so of course she could feel what he was thinking. She saw that he was thinking about rubbing her chest with his hands and still dared to give her a thumbs up. She silently lifted her leg. Seeing that she lifted her leg again, Xiaodong cleverly took a few steps to the side. Looking again, he found that the skin on Lin Xiao's shoulders and arms were white and tender, although it didn't have a ruddy luster. But the smooth luster was also very beautiful, and there were almost no flaws on it. Chapter 190. Although Xiedong looked at it enviously and ate 2 mouthfuls of ice cream, he didn't dare to touch it. However, he didn't dare to touch her. It was obvious that he was looking for a beating. Lin Xiao turned her head and continued to walk forward. The zombies on the way automatically gave way when she was within 5 meters. After leaving the factory's gate, Lin Xiao let go of the car. Then she sat in the front passenger seat with full force. Xiedong consciously sat in the driver's seat, started the car, and then turned to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao raised her hand and pointed in the direction that gave her a strange feeling, then patted the front. Xiedong knew that she meant for him to speed up a little, so he nodded, stepped on the gas and drove out. Along the way, Lin Xiao directly pointed him in the direction. Until an hour later, Lin Xiao's expression changed. The electronics factory they were in before was on the outskirts of the West Lake District. Now they had passed through the entire West Lake District and entered the upper city. Hangzhou's upper and lower city were both in the city center. The population was also very dense. Arriving here, Lin Xiao's feeling was very clear. Even Xiedong himself felt a few oppressive breaths, which completely suppressed his own breath. After parking the car on the side of the road, he looked at the large number of ordinary zombies wandering in front of the car. Those zombies also turned their heads to look at them. The various zombies' faces also had a trace of doubt. Xiedong turned his head to look at Lin Xiao. At this time, Lin Xiao opened the door and walked out. She had already restrained her breath on the way, so that she was similar to ordinary zombies. So when they arrived here, the road was blocked by these zombies. After waiting for Xiedong to come down, Lin Xiao put away the car. At a glance, there were hundreds of thousands of zombies around. They were all waiting at the end of the street, like an old man walking quickly, swaying blindly as they walked. After Lin Xiao restrained her breath, they would no longer avoid her. However, Xiedong's breath made these zombies a little concerned, but not to the extent of avoiding her. She stood in the same place and looked left and right, then ran towards the building next to her. Then she quickly jumped up and quickly climbed up from the outside of the building like a monkey. Xiedong saw her actions and quickly followed her, climbing up the wall outside the building. Although he didn't know what Lin Xiao was going to do, this speed was several times faster than running up the stairs. Lin Xiao stood on the rooftop. There were tall buildings everywhere, and the one she climbed was more than 20 stories high. The higher one stood, the farther one could see, and the situation in the distance could be seen clearly. She walked to the edge of the roof and sniffed the air. At the same time, she sensed the level of these high-level zombies and the degree of suppression they had on her. Because the distance was much closer than before, she could feel it more clearly. Moreover, the direction that she had always felt strange was the only direction where she could sense the aura of a living person. Moreover, it was a group of living people. There were more than a dozen living people over there, and there were even a few level 5 zombies around them. What was going on? From that position, it seemed to be very close to the central area. The strength of these people was not very high, at most 2 level 5 metahumans and a few level 3 and 4 metahumans. Look at the number of zombies here. How did they get in? Moreover, this group of people actually had 3 level 5 zombie leaders around them, unexpectedly did not eat them. Lin Xiao carefully sensed the movement over there, but it was about 10 kilometers away. Her perception of the situation here was not clear, and she only knew that the group of people was together with a few zombie leaders. Why would those people be together with such dangerous zombies? Lin Xiao did not understand what was going on, and the situation she sensed now was not in line with the normal situation of this apocalypse. Xiedong climbed up and saw that Lin Xiao was looking in a direction for a long time without saying anything, so he walked over. Looking down from the top, he saw that the ground in front of the building was full of zombies, and there were also zombies moving around in the building. He looked at Lin Xiao and saw that Lin Xiao's face under the hat was still quietly looking in that direction, not knowing what she was thinking. But he did not sense anything over there, and he did not know what Lin Xiao sensed. Lin Xiao thought about it, and decided to directly rush over to those people to find out what was going on. The strange feeling in her heart made her feel a little strange. Thinking about it, she made a sneaking gesture to Xiedong, and pointed in the direction where the smell of those people was coming from. After Lin Xiao finished making the gesture, she took a step back, and then with one foot, she jumped to the top of the opposite building. As soon as she leaped out, her figure suddenly disappeared in midair, as if she had jumped into another dimension. In fact, even Xiaodong did not know how Lin Xiao did it, but this skill was too powerful. Directly stealth sneak attack is the best. But he had seen many scenes of Lin Xiao directly disappearing for a while, and then appearing in another place. But he did not see that after Lin Xiao disappeared, she became a transparent shadow. Lin Xiao quickly jumped from the top of the building to the next building, and then ran forward at full speed, and then continued to jump to the next building. Xiaodong knew that his speed could not keep up with her, and he did not know where Lin Xiao went after stealth. He could only continue to move in the direction that Lin Xiao gave him. Lin Xiao quickly ran and jumped on the top of the building. The height of the building was different, the distance was different, but she directly jumped over it. If it was too far, it was more than 15 meters, she directly jumped to the top of the green trees on the side of the road, and then jumped on the protruding branches. The more she got closer, the more uneasy the strange feeling in her heart became. The 3 zombie leaders were directly ignored by her, and she only wanted to know what was going on with that group of people. She did not recognize the smell, but there was a faint feeling that she could not ignore these people. Half an hour later, Lin Xiao arrived at the place where that group of people were staying. It was very strange, these people were walking on the road. Lin Xiao lay on the top of a tall building, and looked down at the dozens of people gathered on the road and walked forward. And there were many ordinary zombies around them, all of them had their mouths wide open, and it was unknown whether it was blood or saliva, but they slowly followed the group of people all the way forward. But this group of zombies formed a circle around the dozen people, and they did not dare to approach within 2 meters of them. The reason why this group of people obediently walked forward was because there were 3 zombies staring at them, one in front, one in the back, and one in the middle. The one in front was obviously leading the way, and the one in the middle was constantly driving the ordinary zombies to the side. The last one was to prevent this group of people from escaping. Lin Xiao looked at the 3 level 5 zombie leaders, and from their appearance and clothes, she could not see their original appearance. Whether they were male or female, young or old, she also could not see, because their faces were all badly mutilated, and their big mouth had a row of sharp teeth, and their protruding eyes were pitch black without any white. If this was before the end of the world, it could directly scare a bunch of people to death. Chapter 191. Lin Xiao looked at them for a while, then moved a few meters in front of the group of people, and then jumped down from the top of the building. Hiding in the group of zombies, she retracted her aura and squeezed in the direction of the group of people. When she got closer, she realized that she actually knew the 2 people in front of them. Orang. It wasn't she who knew them, it was Lu Tianyu who knew them. Looking at the 2 faces, even though they were covered in dust, they were still very handsome and beautiful young faces. Lin Xiao silently said in her heart, how could it be such a coincidence? Was this fate? One of these 2 faces belonged to someone Lu Tianyu was very familiar with. It was her younger brother. When Lin Xiao looked at Lu Tianyu's memory before, there was indeed an impression of a younger brother. Although Lu Tianyu's memory was very messy, now she saw that face. Lin Xiao still remembered. This was Lu Tianyu's younger brother from different mothers. Because she always felt that her stepmother was the murderer who destroyed their family, she didn't like this younger brother of hers. The 2 of them had always been at odds since they were young. After the apocalypse, Lu Tianyu didn't want to have anything to do with this younger brother. In the base, they basically pretended not to know each other. Lu Tianyu, why was he here? And now the situation of these people. Were they caught by zombies? Lin Xiao followed the zombies next to her and followed Lu Tianyu and the others forward. There was also another familiar face, which was Kong Qingming next to Lu Tianyu. Kong Qingming was Lu Tianyu's good friend, and he often came to the Lu family in the past. So Lu Tianyu was no stranger to him. But looking at the appearance of the 3 level 5 zombie leaders, where were they going to take them? Lin Xiao knew that with her current strength, it was more than enough to deal with 1 zombie leader. Against 2 she could still win. He could still win against 3 of them, because she had the black mist. Lin Xiao quietly released a faint black mist from her hand, using her consciousness to control it to separate into 3 strands and float towards the 3 zombie leaders. While walking towards Lu Tianyu and Lu Tianyu, who were walking at the front. Where are these zombies going to take us? I don't know. It's strange. They don't eat us. You seem very happy. Even if they don't eat us now, do you think they won't eat us when we get there? Haha, we're really unlucky this time. When Lin Xiao leaned over, he happened to hear the conversation between Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming. The two of them had now grown into rare handsome men. Although their faces were covered in wounds, blood, dust, and mud, it was still a rare sight. However, it wasn't hard to tell that the two of them had outstanding looks. Hearing Kong Qingming say that he was in big trouble this time, Lu Tianyi's eyes immediately flashed with hatred. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it! If I can make it back alive this time, I'll definitely exterminate that despicable Wu Weiyun. He actually led a level 5 zombie to our side and ran away." Kong Qingming looked ahead as he walked and said weakly, "Forget it. Do you think we can go back alive? Perhaps I'm dreaming before I die." His eyes had already lost their luster, and he walked forward with a numb expression. The further he went, the closer he felt he was to death. Although he didn't know why these zombies just followed them and drove them forward, they didn't immediately swarm and bite them. Hearing Kong Qingming's words, the hatred in Lu Tianyi's eyes faded, and he lowered his head. At this time, Lin Xiao was mixed in with the group of zombies. Although these zombies were covered in blood and dirt, she was a clean zombie. There was still a big difference between these ordinary zombies and the group of ordinary zombies. But who asked these zombies to not care about this? Although she couldn't sense the thoughts of the 3 level 5 zombies, she could sense the thoughts of the zombies around her. Food. Can't eat. Leader. Food. Food. For. Leader. Food. Can't. Eat. Want to eat. Can't. Ordinary zombies' thoughts were very simple, but Lin Xiao still received a key message. Leader? What did that mean? Is this leader a level 3 zombie leader? Could it be that these 3 zombie leaders were the overlords of this area? So the zombies didn't dare to eat the food they identified? Very likely. A level 5 zombie leader was like a king in the animal world. Like a wolf king or a lion king, they had their own status and rules. While Lin Xiao was thinking, she secretly turned the black mist into a few strands of black gas and flew towards the 3 level 5 zombies. These 3 zombie leaders had very keen senses. When Lin Xiao's black gas was just 1 meter away from them, they immediately noticed it. Roar. The last one suddenly let out a low roar and stopped. As it roared, the other zombies also stopped. And they all vigilantly looked around. Especially the 3 zombie leaders, their eyes were very sharp as they stared at their surroundings. They immediately saw the black gas. Seeing the black gas coming towards them, one of them reacted quickly and waved his hand. A small wind blew up from the ground. Lin Xiao's black gas was instantly washed away. Lin Xiao's black gas was blown away by the wind and lost control. But soon she found that although the black gas was washed away, it didn't disappear. The black gas became very thin and flew towards the surrounding zombies. Soon it stuck to these ordinary zombies. Then, he quickly created one pit after another on their bodies. The ordinary zombies didn't care about the holes on their bodies, and soon their limbs were broken. They didn't seem to take it seriously. But when the 3 level 5 zombies saw their situation, they immediately screamed. Roar! The zombie leader roared, and the surrounding ordinary zombies immediately went crazy. Roar, 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 roar. Looking at the group of zombies that started to run crazily, Lin Xiao immediately went invisible. Then he reacted quickly and dodged into the inner circle. Even if the ordinary zombies were to run around crazily, they still couldn't reach the 3 zombie leaders. The humans, who were confused by the sudden situation, looked at the rampaging zombies in confusion. Looking at the 3 motionless level 5 zombies that were guarding them, they didn't know what was going on. At this time, Lin Xiao quietly approached Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming. Although she wanted to kill the 3 zombie leaders first, she had to consider the group of humans who had lost their fighting strength. She'd better put them into the space one by one first. Perhaps with some selfish thoughts, Lin Xiao went to Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming first. She was different from Lu Tianyi, she also had a younger brother and sister. Although Lu Tianyi didn't like Lu Tianyi in his heart, and could even do nothing to save him, she, Lin Xiao, couldn't do it. Since she had met him, she had to save him. Chapter 192. The 3 level 5 zombies seemed to be different from the other level 5 zombies. Not only could they gather together peacefully, they didn't start killing each other as soon as they saw each other like other high-level zombies. Moreover, these 3 zombies could work together as a team. Looking at one tightly guarding this group of people, the other 2 were nervously and vigilantly searching outside. It seemed that if an enemy appeared, it would only be those 2. There was still one left to keep an eye on the prey, to prevent them from running away or being rescued. This kind of action was already close to the combat intelligence of human beings. Lin Xiao increasingly felt that these 3 zombie leaders were not simple. She became more alert as well. She silently and invisibly walked in front of Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming. Fortunately, these 2 people were staying together. Lin Xiao stretched out her 2 hands and gently pressed on their shoulders. And, at the same time, Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming had just noticed something and turned their heads to look at Lin Xiao's shoulder. Suddenly a figure flashed in front of them, and then before they could clearly see who it was, their eyes suddenly blurred. Then in the blink of an eye, they found that the scene in front of them had changed. Looking at the clear lake in front of them, Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming were already dumbfounded. Seeing things? Think, should be, illusion. And I think so too. You say, could it be that when we close our eyes again we went back to where we were just now? Maybe. Then the 2 people turned their heads to look at the surrounding environment in a daze. Outside, Lin Xiao put the 2 people in, and she immediately flashed out. Then she quickly reached out and pressed on the 2 men standing behind Lu Qianni and the others. Then they disappeared together again. Lin Xiao's movements were very fast, until she put in the 3rd group of people. The zombie that was guarding Lu Qianni and the others finally reacted. Roar dash, it immediately roared. And when Lin Xiao appeared for the 4th time to grab the other 2 people, it rushed towards Lin Xiao. Although its reaction was very fast and its movements were also very fast. However, Lin Xiao's movements were much faster than the zombie. Before the zombie could even reach him, Lin Xiao had already killed the zombie. Before this zombie rushed to her side, she quickly pressed down the 2 people and then flashed again. Within a few seconds she had thrown 7 or 8 people into the space. After Little Man helped her repair and upgrade this time, her movement speed was 2 levels faster than before. Therefore, no one, including the zombie guarding the prey, could see her figure clearly. All they saw was a military green figure flash by. After Lin Xiao threw the 8 people into the space, he didn't care about their dumbfounded expressions as he continued to sneak out of the space. The zombie pounced on empty air and roared furiously. Roar! It stood at the place where Lin Xiao had disappeared like a madman. It looked up and down, left and right, and its gaze quickly swept across the surroundings a few times. But no matter how it looked, it could not find the military green figure from before. The other 2 zombies that were attracted by the 2 roars turned their heads back. And when they turned their heads back, they obviously found that their prey had decreased in number. Although they didn't know how many people were missing, they didn't know how many people they originally had. But they knew very little. It couldn't be helped. Who asked them to have a higher IQ? But they didn't learn mathematics. Lin Xiao looked at their reaction and found that even though the 3 of them were furious, they still didn't look like they wanted to do anything to these living people. She was afraid that her action would anger these 3 zombies. In a fit of anger, they directly attacked and killed the person to settle the matter. Now that she had already saved half of the people, she still didn't have the intention to do anything. But the 3 zombie leaders had driven the remaining people into a pile, and the 3 of them were tightly guarding the periphery. Lin Xiao looked at the remaining 5 people and quietly walked over. He carefully stood in the gap between the 2 zombies, and then put one hand inside. She grabbed a person's clothes and directly flashed away. At this moment, because she couldn't put both hands in, the probability of touching the zombie leader was too high. Lin Xiao approached them and directly stole a person from their hands. The 2 zombies reacted very quickly. When they saw Lin Xiao flashed away, they suddenly turned around and grabbed her. But their 4 claws still caught nothing. And Lin Xiao put this person into her space, and immediately flashed away. Then, just as the 2 hands missed their target, he grabbed another person from the side and disappeared again. Roar, 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 roar. The 3 zombie leaders were already flustered and angry because their prey kept disappearing. They immediately formed a hurricane around them, and then a big fire started burning. Wind and fire mixed together, quickly forming a fire tornado of wind and fire. It was more than 10 meters high and enveloped the 3 zombies and the last 3 people. When Lin Xiao saw such a cool skill, she stood at the side and couldn't help but praise. But she was worried in the next second. Seeing that the 3 people in the fire tornado had already started to call for help, she temporarily couldn't use the previous method to save people. Help! Don't leave us behind. Which expert is it? Please save us. Save me. And me. And me. Save me. Please. Don't leave us behind. Seeing their comrades suddenly disappear with a shadow, the 3 people instinctively felt that someone was coming to save them. But they didn't expect that before the other person could save them, they would be stopped by these 3 level 5 zombies. Lin Xiao looked at the 3 people and 3 zombies in the fire tornado, and then looked around. Because of the rage of the level 5 zombies, the dense group of ordinary zombies that surrounded them all disappeared. Obviously, they were all scared away, and ran into the nearby alleys and corridors. This area immediately became empty. They ran quite fast. Lin Xiao looked around and found that Xie Dong was standing behind a wall not far away, looking at her. She immediately made a gesture to him, telling him to stay where he was and not move. Lin Xiao turned around and walked towards the fire tornado. She circled around the tornado, and found that there was temporarily no way to go in and save the 3 people. Even if she was invisible, she still had a physical existence. She reckoned that if she went in like this, she would be burned. Looking at the nearby buildings, they weren't as high as the fire, and she couldn't jump in from the building. The 3 people shouted for a while and then despaired. Because with their current size, unless they killed these 3 zombie leaders, they wouldn't be able to save them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to save them. But who had the ability to kill 3 zombie leaders at once? A rank 6 metahuman might not even be able to win against a rank 5 zombie leader. Unless the person who had just rescued their comrade was a level 7 base leader, they wouldn't be able to do so. Thinking about it, it was impossible. Haiqing base only had 3 leaders. Big shots like them wouldn't specially come to save them. Chapter 193. Everyone in Lin Xiao's space was looking at each other in silence. Yes, because they hadn't realized what was going on. There was someone with a quick reaction who saw Lu Qianni next to him and immediately asked, "Captain, this is the special ability space?" Looking at the lake, looking at the grass, looking at the high-end furniture that was neatly placed on the side, and the stove next to their feet. At this time, Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming, who came in first, had carefully observed the space twice. Hearing the team member's question, he answered hesitantly, "I think it should be. But did you see the person who brought you in?" The others shook their heads. Kong Qingming said he was too fast. "I only noticed an army green shadow. Fortunately, he continued to bring people in a few more times. Only then did I see that he was wearing camouflage clothes." As soon as he finished speaking, the others looked at him. He could actually take us into the space without a sound. Those zombie leaders didn't even have time to react. How did he do it? Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming looked at each other. Kong Qingming replied, "We also want to know how he did it." As he said that, he looked at the number of people and suddenly said, "There are still 3 people who haven't come in." As soon as he said that, the others looked around and found that there were indeed only 10 people here. They were still missing 3 people. The last 2 who came in said, "I think that person shouldn't be able to save the 3 of them. Because before we came in, the 3 zombie leaders were already very nervous. Seeing the 2 of us disappear directly in their hands, it may have stimulated them. Maybe they have already used their ultimate move." Lu Qianni's eyes kept tracing the lake in front of him, and then turned to look at the grass. Suddenly, his eyes froze as if he saw something strange. Then he turned and lifted his feet to walk in the direction of the grass. Seeing Lu Qianni walking, the others naturally followed. After Lu Qianni walked over, he was sure what he saw. "This is mutated strawberry? A cabbage? Lettuce? Look, those big pumpkins. They are all mutated. And potatoes, such a big pile, what are they used for? It must have mutated." Looking at the vibrant strawberries and vegetables in Lin Xiao's space, as well as the untouched pumpkins and potatoes, Lu Qianni and the others were puzzled. At this moment, a small gray shadow suddenly jumped out from the strawberry field. It jumped into the bushes and disappeared without a trace. If I'm not wrong, that should be a rabbit. You're not mistaken. I saw it too. Everyone was dumbfounded as they watched the little rabbit disappear. Some of them stood at the side of the strawberry field and stared blankly. Outside, Lin Xiao stood 5 meters away from the fire tornado. She felt hot just by getting a little closer. Therefore, he could only stay a little further away. Seeing that the 3 of them were not going to kill the 3 people immediately, Lin Xiao thought for a moment and decided to show himself. Roar dash! As soon as she appeared, the 3 zombies roared at her. One of them immediately jumped out of the ring of fire and pounced towards her. Lin Xiao looked at the zombie pouncing towards her with flames all over its body. Its speed wasn't considered fast in her eyes. She calmly stood in place and waited for the zombie to pounce in front of her. She suddenly dodged and moved to the side of its body. Then she raised her hand and slapped down with her claw. Bang dash! This flame zombie didn't expect Lin Xiao, who didn't feel threatened at all, to be able to easily dodge its attack. Moreover, as soon as she turned around, she slapped its back. After Lin Xiao slapped it, she didn't stop her movements. She hooked her hand back and slashed out with her claw. Puff dash! It was just a collision. This flame zombie quickly fell to the ground with a bang, and the flames on its body instantly extinguished. But Lin Xiao's movements didn't stop just like that. She casually waved her hand. A thick cloud of black smoke gushed out. It was no longer a wisp of smoke like before. The black smoke covered the corpse of the zombie on the ground and rolled it up. In an instant, the ground was clean. The corpse of the zombie that was lying on the ground a second ago was now gone. Only a head was left on the ground. Lin Xiao then waved her hand in the direction of the fire tornado. The rolling black smoke in front of her immediately rolled towards that direction. After the flame zombie died, the flames on the other side of the fire tornado also slowly dissipated. Soon, only the rotating hurricane was left. The 2 zombies that were guarding the 3 human prey saw Lin Xiao's black smoke gushing out, and they showed a rare look of fear. Their bodies were getting lower and lower. The roar that was originally directed at Lin Xiao in their throats also slowly became softer. It turned into a low whine. Now that there was no fire, Lin Xiao followed the approach of the black smoke. After hearing the 2 level 5 zombies see the black smoke, they began to retreat with their consciousness. Lin Xiao was still very vigilant in her heart. Although she felt that these 2 zombies should be preparing to abandon their prey and escape, she let them escape. But she still had to prevent them from killing the 3 people when they escaped. Lin Xiao increased the density of the black mist. The thick black mist melted everything within a 10-meter radius around him. The asphalt road under her feet and the stones on the ground, the old cars piled up around them, the grass, trees and lampposts on the side of the road. After being swept by the black smoke, they were all quickly decomposed and melted. The black smoke was a kind of energy. When Lin Xiao opened her eyes, she saw that the black smoke energy was purple and had a strange luster. When she opened her eyes, she only saw thick black. Her control of the black smoke was actually just controlling the energy. The area of the black mist slowly expanded, and then gradually pressed towards the 2 zombies' tornadoes. Seeing that the black smoke was getting closer, and the area was getting bigger and bigger, the 2 zombies finally couldn't endure it anymore. With a howl, they actually turned around and ran. They ran? Suddenly, she saw that the 2 zombies that were originally baring their fangs and brandishing their claws were instantly taken care of, and the other 2 were actually scared away. The 3 people who suddenly became safe from danger looked at each other in a daze. Seeing that the 2 zombies turned around and ran, Lin Xiao calmly withdrew the black smoke. From the moment she released the black smoke, she felt that these 2 zombies were very afraid. So she just controlled the black smoke to slowly approach them, using this slow speed to increase their psychological activity. The result was very obvious. These 2 only had the intelligence of an ordinary 6 or 7-year-old child. In the face of a threat, they would choose to run away in fear. Because of this, Lin Xiao enlarged the black smoke and then slowly pressed towards the other side. Then these 2 zombies couldn't bear the pressure, and they turned around and ran away without even taking their prey. Chapter 194. After Lin Xiao retracted the black mist, the surroundings became empty. Looking at the road that suddenly became empty, All the cars, rocks, trees, and flowers that the black mist passed through were gone, and even the ground had sunk in. It was as if a layer of land had been peeled off. Lin Xiao stood opposite and looked at the three men with dumbfounded expressions, then looked around. Only then did he signal Xiaodong, who was in the corner, to come out. After Xiaodong came out, he walked towards Lin Xiao. "Hey, isn't that Xiaodong from Area C? He seems to have been missing for a long time." After seeing Xiaodong come out from afar, one of the three people actually recognized him. Xiaodong's ears twitched, and when he walked to Lin Xiao's side, he looked at them. He had just recognized one of them. Previously, when they were out on a mission, they had worked together once. But it had been a long time, and they had not contacted each other after that, because the living area they lived in was not in the same area. This person was called Huang Shou, about 25 years old. He was a rank 3 Earth ability user, but he should have no energy now. Xiaodong lived in Area C on the outskirts of Sea City Base, and Huang Shou lived in Area A. Lin Xiao brought Xiaodong in front of the three people, and then he simply sized them up. Huang Shou and the other two looked at Lin Xiao gratefully, only to realize that Lin Xiao was a woman. Although she was wearing a hat and sunglasses, her slender waist and slender white arms could not be seen. Although she had a camouflage jacket tied to her shoulders, and the fabric of the jacket covered her chest, the curve could not be covered. She wore loose military camouflage pants and a pair of military boots. She was dressed very militarily, but she did not have any weapons on her. This must be an expert. At this level, unless it was a heavy weapon, it would be useless. After seeing Lin Xiao's appearance, Huang Shou quickly turned his gaze to Xiaodong, and said with slight excitement, "I didn't expect it to be you, Xiaodong. Why did you come to Zombie City? And this is..." He knew that Xiaodong and this woman had not appeared here to save them. This time they were just passing by to save them. Xiaodong nodded to Huang Shou, then pointed to his throat, and waved his hand. Huang Shou looked at his movements strangely and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with your throat? Can't you speak?" Xiaodong nodded to him again. Lin Xiao turned around and walked in front of the zombie's head. She squatted down and used her hand to draw out a wisp of black smoke and swirled it around the head. The black smoke slowly revolved around the zombie's head and quickly dissolved it, leaving behind a flickering zombie core. After Huang Shou greeted Xiaodong, he immediately approached Xiaodong. Then he glanced at Lin Xiao and asked him, "Who is she?" Her black smoke seemed to be very powerful. Even the zombie leader was scared away. This was probably no lower than a level 6 arcana. There doesn't seem to be such a person in our base. Where did she come from? Xiaodong glanced at him before taking out a small notebook and a pen from his pants pocket. He then wrote a sentence for him to read. "Ask her yourself." They didn't know that Lin Xiao was a zombie, so Xiaodong wouldn't tell them. Xiaodong didn't know how to introduce Lin Xiao. He might as well let Huang Shou ask her himself. "You want me to ask her myself? So mysterious. Right, where did she take our team leaders?" Huang Shou was stunned when he saw Xiaodong's words. Then he suddenly remembered that the others were missing. At this time, Lin Xiao had already picked up the zombie core and disappeared in a flash. Huang Shou, who was originally thinking about how to greet Lin Xiao, suddenly saw that Lin Xiao had disappeared again. Only then did he think of something and quickly turned to ask Xiaodong. She disappeared. When we were saving them just now, we didn't see her figure, so she directly disappeared. What's going on? Is she also a space arcanist? Xiaodong looked at him and nodded but didn't say anything. At this time suddenly, a figure flashed at the place where Lin Xiao had just disappeared, and 3 figures appeared. Then the next second, one of them immediately disappeared. Seeing the sudden appearance of the people, Huang Shou immediately shouted with joy, "Captain! Vice Captain!" Then the 3 of them immediately went over to Lu Qianni, and the other man who had just been sent out by Lin Xiao. "Oh, that's great. The 3 of you are fine." Lu Qianni saw that Huang Shou and the other 2 were still alive and standing in front of him, and immediately became happy. Huang Shou nodded to him, took a deep breath, blinked his eyes, and said with the emotion of surviving a disaster, "I almost thought we were all going to die here today." Lu Qianni also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that everyone is fine." At this time, another 2 people were sent out of the space by Lin Xiao. Lu Qianni immediately turned his head and saw a slim military green figure send people out, and the next second, she disappeared again. It was too fast and he couldn't see the person clearly. Seeing his own people being sent out one after another, Huang Shou didn't say anything. Together with Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming, they watched the person send people out again and again. Lin Xiao had to send the people out 3 times before they were all sent out. Finally, her figure flashed, and she stood 2 meters away from Lu Tianyi and looked at him. Only then did Lu Tianyi see Lin Xiao's appearance clearly. But he quickly frowned and stared at Lin Xiao's face under the hat in silence. Xiedong silently stood behind Lin Xiao. Seeing Lu Tianyi's eyes, he guessed that Lu Tianyi might have recognized that Lin Xiao was Lu Tianyu. But looking at his expression, it was hard to tell if he couldn't believe it or was not sure. Hey, we're out. Where are the 3 zombie leaders? Hey, this is still where we were just now. But what's going on with the ground? Boss. The others were suddenly pulled out by Lin Xiao, and they quickly reacted. They immediately looked around and were alert. After confirming that there was no danger, they breathed a sigh of relief. Then they all saw Lin Xiao and Xiedong standing opposite them. Huang Shou leaned over to Kong Qingming's ear and whispered, "Vice Captain, she saved us. Did you enter her space just now?" Kong Qingming nodded to him and looked at Lu Tianyi's appearance. He didn't make a sound. The others also noticed that Lu Tianyi was frowning and staring at Lin Xiao, and they felt that this wasn't very good. After all, Lin Xiao had just rescued them from the zombies. At this time, Lu Tianyi suddenly put away his expression, and then said to Lin Xiao with a grateful smile, "You saved us this time, let's not talk about anything else. Everyone in our team owes you a life this time. If you need anything, just tell us. I'm Lu Tianyi, the captain of Haiqing Base's Agricultural Division 3. I don't know your name. Yes, this time we all owe you a life. If you need it in the future, we will definitely return it." When the others heard Lu Tianyi's words, they immediately opened their mouths to echo. Chapter 195. Lin Xiao looked at them and didn't say anything. The eyes under her eyes were calm, quietly looking at Lu Tianyi and the others. She could feel their sincere gratitude, but she also felt the doubts of Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming. After thinking about it, she slightly raised her head and revealed her face. Sure enough, Lin Xiao looked up. After the whole face was revealed, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming's expressions changed. The others didn't have any reaction. The smile on Lu Tianyi's face slightly stiffened and then disappeared in an instant. His eyes widened and his pupils shrank. He raised his hand and pointed at Lin Xiao but didn't say anything. The others saw Lu Tianyi's reaction and showed a strange expression. "What's wrong, boss? Do you know this beauty?" Huang Shou looked at Lin Xiao's face, that delicate chin and beautiful lips. She should be a beauty. He really wanted to see what her eyes looked like. At this time, Kong Qingming raised his hand and pressed down Lu Tianyi's hand, saying in his ear, "Calm down, maybe it's just a look." Seeing Kong Qingming's action, Huang Shou and the others were even more confused. Lu Tianyi took a deep breath, calmed his emotions and then nodded. "Don't forget, she doesn't have an ability." Kong Qingming let go of his hand and reminded him. "I know." Lu Tianyi nodded and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had calmed down. But even if Kong Qingming said so, he was clear in his heart. In fact, he didn't see wrong. Of course, he was very familiar with this face. Whether it was heavy makeup or not, he could recognize it at a glance. The hat with sunglasses couldn't cover it at all. But what Kong Qingming said was right, that person didn't have an ability. But the person in front of him had space. That person wouldn't save him, and it was even more impossible for her to come all the way to such a dangerous and terrible zombie. So it could only be said that the person in front of him just happened to pass by and save them. She wasn't her. But at least they grew up together. How could he recognize the wrong person? Lu Tianyi didn't know because his own emotions were fluctuating too much. Lin Xiao, who stood less than 2 meters away, could actually sense what he was thinking. Kong Qingming was his best friend, and they had been good brothers for so many years. Of course, he knew Lu Tianyi's current state and his thoughts. He sighed to himself and didn't say anything else. She just followed him to look at Lin Xiao. At this time, Huang Shou suddenly asked a question. "That, sister, since you don't want to tell me how to address you, I'll just call you that. There's a question I'm not sure if I can ask you." Lin Xiao glanced at Huang Shou. Seeing that he was in his 20s, there was nothing wrong with calling her sister, so she nodded. Lu Tianyi, Kong Qingming, and the others immediately glanced at Huang Shou. Huang Shou gulped, then carefully asked, "May I ask if you're a dual ability user?" As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the people on their side immediately changed. He stared at Lin Xiao. Even Lu Tianyi was stunned for a moment before staring at Lin Xiao. It seemed as if they wouldn't give up until Lin Xiao answered. Apart from Huang Shou's group of 3, no one else had seen Lin Xiao use the Black Mist ability. When they suddenly heard Huang Shou's question, they were all shocked. Because dual ability users were considered heresy. In the post-apocalyptic world, dual ability users were very rare talents. At least in the millions of people in Sea City base, there was only one dual ability user. And it was a natural life ability user. The dual ability user was an old man, but because of the evolution of his water and wood abilities after the apocalypse, his body functions had recovered a lot. Although he was already in his 70s, he looked no different from a person in his 50s. This was very normal. Basically, after the apocalypse, ability users were stronger and healthier than ordinary people, and the speed of aging was greatly reduced. In other words, these ability users, apart from the changes in their aura and skills, did not change much in their appearance. And the people in Sea City base knew that this dual ability old man was an important person in the base. It was just that he didn't like to be in power. Otherwise, there might be another person in the leader's position. Although he was now a level 6 dual ability user, his combat power was not inferior to a level 7 leader. This was not the point. The point was that the number of dual ability users was very small. There were so many survivors in Sea City, but there was only one dual ability user. But they heard that there were many dual ability users in the base of Wuxia City. After all, it was a super base and its strength was at least 3 times stronger than that of Sea City. Seeing their shining eyes, Lin Xiao silently rolled her eyes. She didn't know what was wrong with Huang Shou's brain. He could see with his own eyes that she used 2 kinds of abilities, but he still asked such a stupid question. Before Lin Xiao replied, Xiedong had already written a sentence on the paper, and then directly tore it into a ball and threw it to Huang Shou's head. "That hurts." Huang Shou wanted to dodge, but he didn't expect that he couldn't dodge the small paper ball, so he screamed. Then he hurriedly caught the little ball of paper that was bouncing around. Opening it, he thought, "You are a fool. Is what you saw just now an illusion?" After reading it, Huang Shou said, "Oh," and then he reacted. He did see it just now. There was no mistake. It was a dual ability user. Lin Xiao looked at them and found that although they were all embarrassed and exhausted of energy, they didn't have any serious injuries. However, there were no major injuries on his body. They were all minor injuries that could be ignored. However, if she was not there, it was impossible for them to leave the zombie city with their current fighting power. But if she let them follow her, it meant that they had to go to the center where there were more zombies. Moreover, there were more advanced zombies, which was more dangerous for them. In this case, they could only temporarily stay in their own space. After she finished looking at the terrain, she would come out and send them back to the base. After thinking about it, Lin Xiao decisively took out the writing board. Then he began to write. Seeing Lin Xiao suddenly took out the writing board to write, Lu Tianyi and others were stunned. They looked at Lin Xiao curiously and puzzledly, and then looked at each other. Why did she write again? Was she unable to speak? Just now the man had written in a small notebook, and now there was a big writing board. It seemed that it was really inconvenient for her to speak. When they were thinking about it, Lin Xiao finished writing. Then he raised the board vertically and beckoned them over. Lu Tianyi and the others leaned over and saw a sentence written on it. "I don't have time to send you out of the city right now. You'd better come into my space and rest for 2 days before coming out." It meant that she had other things to do, so it was inconvenient for her to send them out of Zombie City. He had to wait for 2 days. Otherwise, with their current situation, even if they were given a bunch of weapons, they would not be able to survive. There was no guarantee that they would be able to escape from the zombie city unscathed. Chapter 196. Kong Qingming was the first to speak. "In our current state, it's really impossible to rush through hundreds of thousands of zombies and get out of the upper city." He looked around. The place had been empty for a long time. He didn't know why there were no more zombies. It was reasonable to say that the 3 zombie leaders were no longer there. The other zombies should soon come back after smelling them, but they had been standing here for 2 or 3 minutes now, and there was still silence around them. It was very strange. Huang Shouing said, "Yes, we don't have weapons and abilities now. Our combat power has dropped by 80 to 70%. Lu Tianyi said at this time, "No, we can temporarily not enter the space. If we have guns, we can still deal with ordinary zombies. And our abilities will slowly recover, it just takes some time." He actually didn't want to stay in that space. After he saw her, he didn't intend to be protected by her, at least not in the space. That would make him too useless. Moreover, after entering the space, he wouldn't have too many opportunities to contact her. He still wanted to figure out what was going on. Was the Lu Tianyu in front of him really her? Kong Qingming glanced at him and didn't speak. The others looked at each other. Since their boss had already said so, they would just follow him outside. But where are we going to find guns now? Lin Xiao glanced at them and suddenly squatted down and waved his hand on the ground. Puff, 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 puff. After a slight sound of metal falling to the ground, everyone saw a row of guns appear where Lin Xiao waved his hand. Pistols, rifles, semi-machine guns, long-range snipers, and other guns appeared in front of them. After releasing the guns, Lin Xiao stood up and took 2 steps back. Then he pointed at the guns on the ground to Lu Tianyi. Lu Tianyi turned his head and looked at Kong Qingming silent. "Wow, is this for us?" When the others saw the row of guns appear, their eyes went straight. With weapons, it meant that their combat power could increase by 50%. In this way, their lives would be protected by 50%. Lin Xiao just stood quietly and didn't make a sound. But in his heart he complained. "Since I took it out, it must be for you to use. Did I take it out to set up a stall?" Lu Tianyi slowly walked over and stood in front of Lin Xiao, looking at her. He stared at her and finally couldn't help but ask, "Can you let me see your eyes?" His teammates who were following behind him could not wait to crouch on the ground, ready to grab their guns. When they suddenly heard Lu Tianyi's question, they all looked up at him strangely and then turned to look at Lin Xiao. Looking at Lin Xiao's chin from below, she found it even more beautiful. They looked at each other, and an ambiguous smile flashed across their faces. Then they looked at Lu Tianyi in surprise. Could it be that their boss had fallen in love? But this was normal. There weren't many women in the base. Those who could go out of the base to fight zombies were even fewer. Now that they had encountered this powerful and mysterious woman, they naturally wanted to see what kind of eyes she had under her glasses. Actually, they also wanted to see it. The corners of Lin Xiao's mouth curled up slightly. He didn't expect this kid to remember Lu Tianyu so clearly. They had always hated each other. Could it be that the more you hate him, the more you care about him? If you want to see, sure. But don't regret it later. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming both saw Lin Xiao's somewhat strange smile, and a bad feeling arose in their hearts. Suddenly, Lin Xiao took a step forward, stretched out her hands, and grabbed the 2 of them and disappeared directly into the space. "Boss!" Suddenly seeing their captain disappear again, the others were stunned. But soon they were relieved. Their boss wanted to see what the beauty looked like. But the beauty didn't seem to want them to see it. Bringing the boss into the space was probably to let the 2 of them see it. But why not let them see it? She was so beautiful that she was afraid of people looking at her. Or was there something wrong with her eyes? Didn't want too many people to see it? Huang Shou took a rifle, checked the magazine, and leaned over to Xiadong and asked, "Is this woman your boss now? Isn't she very good looking? You're working for her now? But what about your teammates?" And Huang Shou. Xiadong took out a small notebook and wrote, "They are dead. I don't have a squad now." "Ah, is that so?" This was really not good news. Huang Shou looked at him a little awkwardly. After entering the space, Lin Xiao let go of the 2 of them and stood opposite them. She didn't immediately take off her glasses to show them, but turned around and walked to the strawberry field. She picked a few strawberries, and then went to the bucket next to the stove to get some water with a ladle. Then she put the strawberries in and soaked them. After washing them, she directly handed them to the 2 of them. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming watched her pick the strawberries, and then wash them with water. They didn't know what she wanted to do. These were mutated strawberries. The 2 of them didn't think that Lin Xiao would eat them, and they didn't think that Lin Xiao would actually wash them for them to eat. What do you mean? You're not going to give them to us to eat, are you? He looked at Lin Xiao with some doubt. The two of them didn't want to touch it. These were mutated strawberries. Lin Xiao suddenly reached out a hand to pull his hand out, and then forced the strawberries into his hand. Finally, she took one back, put it in her mouth and took a bite. Then she realized that she actually tasted a little sour. Unlike before, there was no taste at all. Huh. Lin Xiao's expression froze for a moment. Then she chewed and swallowed it. She found that there was indeed a little sour taste in her mouth. Seeing her take a big bite of the strawberry in the blink of an eye, Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming were also dumbfounded. Only then did Lin Xiao look at them and say, "Eat it. It's not poisonous." Suddenly hearing Lin Xiao speak so slowly, Lu Qianni immediately looked at her with a puzzled expression. He asked, "What's wrong with your voice? Can't you even speak normally now?" Because he could still hear Lin Xiao's hoarse and rough voice, which was like heaven and earth compared to her original voice. It was as if her throat was broken. Lin Xiao took another bite of the strawberry and said, "Eat. Or not? And show you." Lu Qianni watched her finish the whole strawberry and listened to her slow way of speaking. He said very unaccustomed, "You, Lu Qianni," who had already confirmed that she was Lu Qianyu, now began to doubt himself again. Because Lu Qianyu had never spoken to him in such a peaceful manner, and he would never ask him to eat it. Was she trying to harm him? But she had eaten it herself. He didn't seem to be injured. Chapter 197. Seeing that Lu Qianni's reaction was not as flexible as usual, Kong Qingming asked Lin Xiao, "Are you sure? This is a mutant strawberry. Are you trying to harm your brother and me? Anyway, you don't care about his life or death, do you?" He said it directly, explaining the relationship between Lu Qianni and Lin Xiao's body. Lin Xiao just smiled faintly, then turned around and walked to the chair next to the stove to sit down. On the other hand, Lu Qianni and Kong Qingming could clearly see the contempt in her smile. After sitting down, Lin Xiao raised her head slightly and looked at them. She said, "Dare?" Although it was only one word, the other two heard a sense of provocation from her tone. She was saying that they didn't have the guts. Lu Qianni picked up a strawberry and looked at it closely. He found that the strawberry was so big and the color was not right. But when he smelled it, there was a strong strawberry fragrance. He didn't know that these strawberries had been planted in Lin Xiao's space for so long and had been drenched with lake water. The pungent smell had long disappeared, and there was no such light fragrance now. Lu Qianni looked at Lin Xiao and said, "In fact, you have admitted it yourself. It doesn't matter if I eat it or not. But now you, completely different from before." After looking at Lin Xiao with a complicated look, he put the strawberry in front of him into his mouth. He quickly took a bite. "Hey, even if you want to die, don't die like this." Kong Qingming was shocked. He still couldn't believe that the strawberry was harmless. It had been mutated like this, so it was impossible that it didn't have the zombie virus. After seeing Lu Qianni take a bite, he quickly reached out to pinch his chin. Lu Qianni took a step back and avoided his outstretched hand. He blocked him with his other hand and chewed the strawberry in his mouth. In fact, he knew that if she wanted to harm them, she didn't have to come out to save them. What was the point of saving him and poisoning him? So he chose to believe her. In fact, he wanted to know what happened to her during this time. Why did her voice change and her throat seem to be broken? Lu Qianni quickly swallowed the strawberry in his mouth and didn't have time to react to the taste. He said to Kong Qingming, "Don't worry, she doesn't have to do this." As he spoke, he turned to look at Lin Xiao and asked, "If I eat these mutated strawberries, can you tell me about your future?" Of course, he was referring to what would happen after she raped the leader of the base, but he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Although everyone knew about it now, he didn't know why he was embarrassed to say it in front of this person. This feeling was so strange. The person in front of him was clearly someone he was familiar with, but she gave off the feeling of a stranger. Lin Xiao nodded and did not say anything. She realized that after this kid recognized who she was. His attitude didn't seem to reject her identity as much as she had imagined. Moreover, apart from shock, there was also surprise, worry, and other complex emotions in his reaction just now. However, there were no negative emotions such as hatred and disgust. He still wanted to look into her eyes, but he also wanted to know what was wrong with his throat. He also wanted to know what had happened after she had done that wicked thing. Weren't these people concerned about her? Moreover, Lin Xiao didn't expect that. Previously, he had sensed that strange feeling from afar, and it was coming from this kid. Why was this? Was it blood relations? But she had already become a zombie. What did it have to do with blood relations? After getting Lin Xiao's promise, Lu Tianyi continued to eat the strawberries. When he took another bite, he noticed something that he didn't notice before. It's also very sweet. Sweet and sour tastes good. Lu Tianyi said with a surprised expression, and then handed one to Kong Qingming. He continued, try it. Anyway, even if you don't eat it, she won't let you out of the space. As he spoke, he looked at Lin Xiao. Kong Qingming. Lin Xiao looked at Kong Qingming, who was looking at her, and said, so it had nothing to do with her, she didn't say that. Kong Qingming turned his head and looked at Lu Tianyi. Did this guy want to trick him as well? They were really brothers. Lu Tianyi had already eaten the second one. In fact, they had been hungry for 2 days. Now that they had eaten the first bite, they didn't care about the rest. They didn't know if this woman knew that they were hungry now, so she gave them food. Well, I've eaten what you wanted me to eat. Can you take off your glasses? For some reason, he always cared about her sunglasses. In the past, Lu Tianyu's pair of bright eyes couldn't be covered with sunglasses. Lin Xiao said faintly, don't regret. Lu Tianyi asked her puzzled, what can I regret? Lin Xiao nodded, and then lowered her head slightly. She took off the sunglasses with her hand, and then looked up. Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao only saw a pair of dark eyes without the scara when she looked up, and the entire eyeball was filled with black. There was also a dark light flashing in her eyes. In this space that wasn't too bright, it seemed even more strange. The two almost subconsciously took a few steps back, and stared at her with wide eyes. These were no longer human eyes. They were the eyes that they had seen not long ago, the eyes unique to high-level zombies. Your eyes. Lu Tianyi stared at Lin Xiao and opened his mouth in disbelief, but he couldn't finish a sentence. Lin Xiao suddenly stood up at this time, a pair of strange dark eyes staring at them, and her feet moved towards the two of them step by step. Seeing Lin Xiao coming towards them, and being stared at by such a pair of strange eyes. Even if Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao were calm, they also followed her step by step back. When Lin Xiao took a step closer, they unconsciously took a step back. Lin Xiao took a few steps then stopped. Looking at the two of them, she smiled faintly, and then raised her hand to put on her glasses. Little thing, you still know fear. Just now you kept asking, why don't you know fear? You clearly saw that she was different. Seeing Lin Xiao stop, Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao still took a few steps back. They only stopped when they were 2 meters away from Lin Xiao. Lu Tianyi pointed at Lin Xiao's eyes, and asked with a trembling voice, your eyes. What happened? Kong Qingming also said to Lu Tianyi, she's a zombie. She turned into a zombie. Lu Tianyi turned his head with an expression of disbelief. Looking at Kong Qingming, he opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound. He never thought that under the sunglasses was a pair of eyes like this. Even if she was blind, it was better than this pair of black eyes. Chapter 198. Lin Xiao stood in the same place and silently looked at the two of them for more than 10 seconds before she turned to the chair next to her. She turned the chair with her hand and sat down facing the two of them. She knew that she needed to give the two of them some time to digest the current situation. After seeing Lin Xiao retreat to the chair and sit down, Lu Tianyi and the other person relaxed a little. Without the pressure from Lin Xiao, the two of them immediately became more active. In their eyes, Lu Tianyi was just like a normal person except for his eyes. They couldn't imagine the direction of a zombie at all. Have you ever seen a zombie that was clean and intact? Well, there were indeed, such as Cho Lily. But these two people had never seen Cho Lily. And even Cho Lily had strong dark circles under her eyes. Of course, they didn't know that the Xiedong they had just seen was also a zombie. And who had seen a zombie that didn't eat people? She even saved them and could talk and communicate? Kong Qingming's brain worked faster. He stared at Lin Xiao and looked her up and down. As long as she put on her glasses, he couldn't see how she looked like a zombie at all. But if she wasn't a zombie, what was with her eyes? What are you? Was she a zombie? Or a human? She had the appearance of a human but the eyes of a zombie. She had the eyes of a zombie, but the words and actions of a human. He had never heard of such a zombie. After Kong Qingming asked, he turned his head and looked at Lu Qianni at the same time. They saw that he also wanted to ask these questions. After the two of them looked at each other, they immediately turned their heads to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at the two of them and raised her hand to point at them. Then she turned to her head and gestured. She meant to let them think about it. Lu Qianni stared at Lin Xiao closely, his eyes flashing. He also connected the thoughts in his mind. According to the previous news, Lu Qianni was already dead. Then, if the one in front of him was a zombie, it could indeed be connected with the previous news. Moreover, if she had become a zombie now, then there was another ability in this space that he didn't know what it was. Maybe it was a mutation after becoming a zombie. This could also be established. However, why did she become a zombie after she died? How could he still retain his humanity and sanity? What's more, she was eating strawberries just now. What kind of zombie would eat something like that? If he said that she was not a zombie, then how could he explain her eyes? How do you explain this space? These questions still made Lu Qianni's mind a little confused. Lin Xiao clearly sensed Lu Qianni's conflicted mentality, and so did Kong Qingming next to him. She wondered how he would react if he knew that his soul had been replaced by someone else. She felt that it was necessary to make things clear to him. Otherwise, he would really think of her as his evil sister and cause unnecessary trouble for her in the future. That wouldn't be good. Seeing that the two of them had calmed down, Lin Xiao was about to take out the writing board and say that he was not Lu Qianni. At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly came from the outside world. Lin Xiao's face darkened and he stood up abruptly. Then with a flash he disappeared. The people outside sat on the stone steps to the side to rest. Huang Shoujing asked Xiedong all kinds of questions. Xiedong sat next to him, listening to his questions and writing a sentence for him to read. As he was writing, the person beside him suddenly flashed. Lin Xiao suddenly appeared beside him, but she was alone. But he did not see Lu Qianni. When Lin Xiao came out, he happened to stand beside the two of them. Without another word, he grabbed the two of them and disappeared. Then, in the next second, it reappeared. Then, without saying a word, he grabbed the others and disappeared. His movements were very fast, and he seemed to be in a rush. What's wrong? The others saw Lin Xiao suddenly come out and disappear with his men. Everyone who had entered her space knew that Lin Xiao was bringing them into her space. But he didn't even say a word and moved so quickly. What was going on? Although Lin Xiao's reaction was fast, it was because she was in the space. His reaction to the outside world was a little slow. Therefore, it took her a few seconds to bring Xiedong, Huang Shou, and the others back into the cave. When there were only 4 or 5 people left, he knew in his heart that it was too late. Shit! This time Lin Xiao leaped to the side of the 5 people. Suddenly she kicked the one at the side. Ah, you kicked! Lu Jing, who was suddenly kicked, did not react. After flying to the side, he looked at Lin Xiao with a dumbfounded expression and was about to ask something. However, before he could finish his question, he suddenly heard a thunderous sound above his head. Boom! Following the sound of the thunder, a lightning bolt as thick as an arm fell from the sky. It struck the place where they were just sitting. After Lin Xiao sent Lu Jing flying, she turned around and used the force to kick the other man next to her. Then she turned around to kick the others. However, in the time she kicked 2 people, the others had already moved away automatically. They were afraid that the next one would be kicked by Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao saw that the others moved away automatically, so she immediately moved to the side. Boom boom boom. The people who were kicked were also moved away by themselves. When they moved away, they heard the sound of thunder. Then they saw bolts of lightning strike the place where they were just sitting. 4 to 5 bolts of lightning bombarded the area within 5 square meters of where they were just sitting. The people who were hurriedly thrown into the space by Lin Xiao looked at their 2 bosses blankly. They found that their boss was also looking at them blankly. What's wrong? Lu Qianni sensed that Lin Xiao's actions were not good, so he immediately asked. I don't know. She suddenly threw us in. Huang Shou replied with a confused look. It turned out that he looked at Xiedong next to him. After all, Xiedong was now with that woman, so he might know what was going on. Xiedong closed his eyes and found that he could not sense anything in Lin Xiao's space. When he opened his eyes, he saw Huang Shou looking at him with a questioning look, so he shook his head at him. The others all had an expression as if they did not know what was going on. At this time, after Lin Xiao moved to the side, she suddenly turned around in midair and crossed her hands above her head to block. Pfft! A huge figure had flashed in front of her without her noticing. It swung its palm at her head. Originally, it appeared behind Lin Xiao, but Lin Xiao reacted quickly. When it attacked, it suddenly twisted its body in midair and turned back. The claw that originally wanted to grab the back of her head hit Lin Xiao's crossed arms. Bang! Lin Xiao was sent flying by the claw. Then she heavily smashed into the wall next to her, directly blasting a hole in the wall. Roar! The huge figure landed in the middle of the road as if nothing had happened and roared at Lin Xiao, who had smashed into the wall. Chapter 199. The others didn't know what was going on. Suddenly they heard the sound of a heavy object hitting something. When he turned his head, he saw that the wall had been smashed with a fresh hole. Then they heard the roar of a zombie. When they looked again, they were all dumbfounded. A strange person about 2 meters tall stood there, facing the hole that had just been smashed out. As for this man who suddenly appeared, he was very tall and muscular. He was also very big in size. His muscles were like the Hulk, but the man in front of them wasn't green. It was blood red in color. His arms were as thick as an adult's calf, and his thighs were as thick as electric poles. His whole body was covered in blood. His head was normal, but all his hair had fallen off. His body was flashing with purple lightning. A pair of flashing purple eyes stared at the hole in the wall that Lin Xiao had smashed. It didn't look at the others. But the others who saw it didn't dare to move. What the hell was this thing? Lu Jing and the others were dumbfounded as they looked at the big guy. They had never seen such a huge body with lightning around its body. Moreover, its eyes were glowing with purple light. Only Lin Xiao, who was walking out of the hole, knew that this was a zombie king at the same level as Chou Lily. And it was a rare lightning type. Lin Xiao slowly walked out of the hole. Her eyes under the sunglasses stared at the eyes of the zombie king. The others couldn't see her eyes under the sunglasses, but the zombie king could clearly see Lin Xiao's eyes. It looked at Lin Xiao walking out as if nothing had happened. Its attack didn't cause any effective damage to her. The lightning zombie king roared at Lin Xiao with dissatisfaction. Roar? Lin Xiao heard the warning in its voice, telling her to surrender or else it would kill her. She continued to walk forward while staring coldly at the zombie king's purple eyes. She was shrouded by the strong aura of the zombie king, but she didn't feel too much pressure. It was just a slight level suppression that could be ignored. Xiao Lin knew that the level 6 zombie king could no longer suppress her. After leveling up, she felt that Chou Lily could no longer suppress her aura. It was no wonder that Chou Lily could not sense her strength. Therefore, she didn't care about the zombie king's suppression. After walking out, Lin Xiao stood 5 to 6 meters away from the zombie king. She twisted her neck and loosened her shoulders. Then he stood in front of the zombie king and raised his hands slightly. A puff of black smoke came out. When the zombie king saw that Lin Xiao wasn't willing to surrender, it immediately opened its mouth and let out a low growl, woo woo woo. When it saw Lin Xiao's black smoke, it didn't pay much attention to it. But soon Lin Xiao's black smoke increased and spread out from his body. At this time, the zombie leader felt that something was wrong. It stared at Lin Xiao and narrowed its purple eyes. At this time, the others also reacted and quickly pointed the guns that Lin Xiao gave them at the zombie king. Tututu. A burst of gunshots immediately sounded. Lu Jing and the others had already hidden behind the obstacles. He was holding a gun and shooting at the naked zombie standing in the middle. However, when the bullets hit the zombie king, it didn't seem to be affected. It just turned its head and suddenly waved at Lu Jing and the others. Rumble dash, a few bolts of lightning accompanied by the sound of thunder flew towards them. Not good. The others immediately felt that something was wrong and shouted. Then they all turned around and rolled away. Lin Xiao took advantage of the moment when the zombie king turned its head, and his figure suddenly flashed and disappeared. When the thunder zombie king turned its head, it couldn't see Lin Xiao's figure. It immediately looked around vigilantly. At this time, Lin Xiao turned invisible and jumped on a nearby tree. Then she jumped on top of a lamppost closest to the Zombie King. Then she stepped on top of the lamppost and jumped over the Zombie King's head. When the Thunder Zombie King was looking around strangely, a transparent figure suddenly flashed to a position 2 or 3 meters above its head, and then suddenly appeared. Lin Xiao flipped his body in midair, and his claws, one in front and one behind, slashed down at the lightning Zombie King below. Roar dash! However, the Zombie King's reaction wasn't slow. It suddenly turned sideways, flipped over and rolled to the ground. Poo-poo dash! At the place where it left, a few deep marks that looked like it was cut by a knife immediately appeared on the ground. The Zombie King rolled on the ground and immediately stood up. It slightly arched its back and roared at the marks on the ground. Then it suddenly leaped forward. Lin Xiao just landed on the ground and saw the Zombie King's big head rushing towards her like a bull. At the same time, several bolts of lightning fell on top of her head and instantly struck her whole body. Seeing that the lightning snake was about to bite her, Lin Xiao rolled to the side and suddenly thought of Wu Chongyue. She thought about how she was kind enough to send her child to him, but in the end she was attacked by him. Not good. Bang dash! After Lin Xiao dodged, the lightning fell on the ground and created several small holes. At this moment, the Zombie King nimbly turned around and pounced towards her again. Lin Xiao quickly dodged and immediately became invisible again. At this time her black smoke had unknowingly reached the Zombie King's surroundings. After the Zombie King pounced towards Lin Xiao, it suddenly found that its vision went black. It turned out that the direction where Lin Xiao landed just happened to be in the direction of the black smoke she released. She led the Zombie King towards the direction of the black smoke. At the same time, she also controlled the black smoke to surround the Zombie King. Therefore, when Lin Xiao disappeared, the Zombie King didn't pounce and directly plunged into Lin Xiao's black smoke. As soon as the black smoke touched its body, it immediately corroded a layer of its skin and flesh. Roar dash! The Zombie King let out a loud roar. It was unknown whether it felt pain or not. Roar dash! As it roared, it jumped out of the black smoke. But soon it found that the black smoke seemed to stick to its body. When it rushed out, its whole body was still wrapped in a layer of black smoke. It was unknown whether the Zombie King's flesh contained too much energy, but the speed at which the black smoke melted its flesh was a lot slower. But it was enough to make the Zombie King, which was as strong as a bull, badly mutilated. Roar dash! The lightning Zombie King used its claws to pat its body, as if it wanted to pat the black smoke off its body. But after patting for a while, it found that it didn't work at all. Instead, its hands were stained with more black smoke. Soon there were only bones with shreds of flesh left in its hand. Chapter 200. Seeing that this strange and powerful zombie seemed to be temporarily trapped, the others heaved a sigh of relief and began to evacuate to a safe place. What level is that zombie? Why is it so big? Could it be that it was this tall before it became a zombie? I don't think so. I can sense that the energy in its muscles is very strong. It should have become like this after mutation. Then what level is this guy? And I've never seen a zombie with purple eyes. I don't know, but I can tell. It's a lot stronger than the zombie leaders that chased us to God knows where. Do you think it's a level 6 zombie king? King. Hearing that it was the Zombie King, the others felt their scalps tingle. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Let's leave before it recovers. Then what about that big sister? What big sister? Didn't you see her disappear? Are you stupid? The other party had the space. If they really couldn't fight, they could just hide in the space. You have to take a look at us. If we continue to stay here, not only will it be dangerous, we might even drag them down. Let's go. As they spoke, they immediately made a prompt decision to turn around and retreat to a further distance. The Lightning Zombie King didn't have the mood to care about them anymore. It smacked a few times and realized that the black mist on its body didn't have any effect. The flesh on its body was quickly disappearing. The Zombie King immediately released purple lightning all over its body, which started to cover its entire body like purple snakes. Then, he quickly separated the black mist from his flesh. When the black mist and the purple lightning collided, it quickly turned into a wisp of black smoke that rose up and dispersed. The Zombie King quickly rushed out of the black mist. Strange humming sounds came from his mouth. Humph, humph, humph. After dispersing the black fog on its body, the Zombie King looked even more terrifying. His body was originally covered in blood, but now it had become a bloody mess. Moreover, with every step he took, a large amount of viscous black blood dripped onto the ground. Then it flowed all over the ground. However, this didn't seem to have much of an effect on the Zombie King. After it walked out, it suddenly looked up to the sky and howled. Roar, whoosh, dash, two sounds could be heard as two figures suddenly rushed out and quickly stood in front of the Zombie King. These were two high-level zombies. Lin Xiao recognized them as the two zombies that she had scared away before. So it was his subordinate. You called for help? After the two high-level zombies appeared, they lowered their heads and bowed to the Thunder Zombie. However, Lin Xiao could sense the intense fear coming from them. The fear towards this superior being. So scared? Why? Before Lin Xiao could figure it out, the Zombie King suddenly took a step forward. Its claws glowed with a purple light as it stabbed towards the two high-level zombies. Poochie! The heads of the two high-level zombies were chopped off. Then the Zombie King quickly retracted its claws, which were still holding two corpse cores. The two high-level zombies instantly became corpses, and then fell to the ground. Lin Xiao finally understood what these two high-level zombies were afraid of. They were afraid of being killed. However, they didn't dare to resist, so they could only obediently be killed to get their corpse cores. After the Zombie King took out the corpse cores, it directly threw the two corpse cores that were stained with the brains of the two high-level zombies into its mouth and swallowed them. After swallowing the corpse cores, the Zombie King exhaled and turned around. Suddenly, it raised its hand and pointed at Lin Xiao's black mist. Then a rumble dash sound could be heard from the sky. Following that, bolts of lightning as thin as a pinky descended from the sky and struck the black fog. Pitter-patter, boom 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 dash. Bursts of lightning exploded on the ground. These numerous thin lightning struck the black mist and directly dispersed it. Lin Xiao felt her head become stuffy, and then she lost control of the black mist's energy. She knew that the Zombie King had used the lightning to disperse the energy in her black mist, and the black mist would quickly collapse. Sure enough, a level 6 zombie wasn't easy to deal with. Even the black mist couldn't melt it, so she used her claws to attack it. The Zombie King's reaction was even faster than her, so this was basically useless. How should she fight it? Should she drag it into the spatial lake and let Little Man deal with it? She didn't know if Little Man could keep it under control. Moreover, this body of blood and flesh, if she were to throw it into the lake, who knew how dirty the water would become? Then should she drink it or not? While Lin Xiao was thinking about how to deal with the Zombie King was looking for her everywhere. This Zombie King actually dared to steal the food it had ordered, scaring away the low-level zombies that brought it food. Its prey had also run away. It had been starving for many days and was just waiting for the live food that was delivered this time to be able to fill its stomach. It didn't expect that it would be intercepted by another Zombie King when it was almost at its doorstep. Moreover, this Zombie King's level wasn't even as high as it was. If it was the same level, it wouldn't be so angry. A low-level Zombie King dared to offend it, it was simply provoking it. It was determined to tear this one of its kind apart and dig out its corpse core. While Lin Xiao and the Zombie King were confronting each other, several military vehicles came from the other side dozens of kilometers away. 3 trucks and 2 off-road vehicles were heading towards Lin Xiao's side. At this time, Wu Yueling was curled up in Wu Chengyue's arms, tightly holding the grass dragonfly in her hand, but she closed her eyes and fell asleep like a kitten. Wu Chengyue was holding his daughter while looking out the window. Xiao Yunlong was studying the map next to him. He asked without raising his head, "Are you sure this Thunder King is in the upper city? There are so many zombies here, there should be dozens of level 5 zombie leaders." Haiqing Base knew that the density of zombies in the downtown area of Hangzhou was very high. So basically, a single team would not enter here. Because there were dozens of level 5 zombie leaders here, even if there was a level 6 Zombie King, it was also very normal. But no one would provoke the Zombie King if there was nothing to do. Killing it was a problem. If they couldn't kill it, it might attract the revenge of the zombie tide. Because the Zombie King's intelligence was not low, and it was also very vengeful. Wu Chengyue nodded. It's not that there are many level 5 zombies. Only then can there be a Zombie King. Xiao Yunlong looked up at him, and then looked at little Lingling in his arms. He said, "How sure are you? It's too risky. If you don't kill it, you know the consequences. Wu Chengwe nodded with a faint smile and said, I know. So I will think of a way to kill it, but I need you to look after Lingling for me. Of course he knew that if he didn't kill the zombie king, he would not only be chased for thousands of miles, he might also attract a zombie tide. That would be big trouble. Chapter 201. Xiao Yunlong raised his hand and gently touched the sleeping Wu Yueling, smoothing the bangs on her forehead. He said, of course she is my goddaughter, isn't she? But you have to think clearly. If you don't have the confidence to kill it, it's better not to provoke it, so as not to cause trouble for us. Wu Chengwe just smiled and looked at him without saying anything. Mengyu turned around, looked at him and said, seriously, okay. You don't have to say any more. You also know that the abilities of the 3 leaders in the base have reached this stage. If he doesn't break through soon, if those 2 break through first, our situation won't be good. Xiao Yunlong's expression also sank, and he no longer said anything. Indeed, if there was a level 8 ability user, then their current balance situation would be broken. If it was Luo Shihui who broke through first, their situation would not be too bad. If it was Yang Chao, then they would definitely be suppressed. Yes, if they were not forced by the current situation. Wu Chengwe didn't have to take this risk so early. Mengyu said at this time, and Hangzhou has a large population, so the resources stored should not be small. If we can deal with the king this time, maybe we can find a lot of resources. Think about this, we have to give ourselves something to look forward to. The convoy continued to move forward, but the direction was in Lin Qiao's direction. Dozens of kilometers would not take much time. But at this time, Lin Qiao's situation made her a little depressed. Because of Lin Qiao's invisibility, the zombie king couldn't find her position. So it went crazy. Large groups of lightning began to fall from the sky within 100 meters of this garden, madly bombarding. The surrounding buildings, roadside green trees and lampposts, etc. were all hit by the lightning. Wires and high-voltage wires flew everywhere. And the stone bricks and cement on the buildings also fell everywhere. Boom boom. Poof. Bang. Bang. There were continuous explosions all around. At this time Lin Qiao had already flashed into the space. She stood by the lake and closed her eyes to look at the situation outside. She saw the zombie king go crazy and seemed to be looking for her figure. Little thing. You hid in the space, what else can you do? You want to bomb, you want to bomb, you want to bomb. Do whatever you want. You have a lot of energy anyway, so you can be willful. But she couldn't get out now because she would be blasted the moment she went out. Even if she was invisible, she couldn't escape the fate of being bombarded. This was because the number of lightning bolts falling from the sky was too dense. They were so dense that it looked like a rain of lightning. He estimated that after a while, he would only be able to see the flattened buildings, broken tiles, and broken trees outside. At this time, Lu Tianyi and the others were standing behind her, watching her face the lake with her eyes closed. No one knew what he was doing. Why did they suddenly throw us in here? Why didn't you bring Lu Jing and the others in? That's right. Why are we the only ones here? Boss, what did you tell her? Lu Tianyi glanced at them and said, it has nothing to do with you. I'm also curious why she suddenly brought you in. We haven't finished our discussion yet. She suddenly ran out and then suddenly threw you guys back in. The 2 of them were so confused by her identity that they didn't even have time to digest it. Then they saw her suddenly run out in a hurry and throw her people in. Kong Qingming also asked them with a strange expression, did you find anything outside? Why didn't Lu Jing and the others come in? Huang Shou shook his head and replied with some confusion, we didn't find anything unusual. We were sitting by the roadside and chatting. She suddenly ran out and pulled us in without saying anything. Then she continued to pull the others in. Lu Jing and the others were at the end. I don't know why she didn't bring them in. At this time, Xie Dong wrote a sentence in the book and held it in front of them. She didn't have time to bring those people. When the others saw this, they all asked him in confusion, didn't have time. Why? Xie Dong saw Lin Qiao's action and knew that she must have sensed something, so she suddenly pulled them in. Otherwise, how could she have pulled them in? There must be some danger. Xie Dong just shook his head at the other's question. At this time Lin Qiao opened her eyes and looked back at them. Then, he slowly opened his mouth and said, King, however, Lu Qianni and the others didn't understand what she meant. King? What king? Kong Qingming asked in confusion. Huang Shou and the others were shattered by Lin Xiao's hoarse voice. They originally thought that Lin Xiao's voice would be very pleasant. It could be a sexy, domineering voice, or it could be a cold, clear voice. But they never expected that when she opened her mouth, not only was her voice rough, but it was also unpleasant. It was even rougher than a man's voice. Xiadong's expression was slightly stunned, and then he looked at her with some surprise. He wrote on the book, King of Zombies? Level 6? Lin Xiao nodded at him. The others also looked over curiously, but because of the distance only Huang Shou, who was next to Xiadong, saw what he wrote. Huh, King of Zombies? Level 6. After reading it, his eyes widened. Then he immediately looked up at Lin Xiao and then at the others. When the others heard what he said, they were also dumbfounded. They all showed an expression that it was not true, that it was impossible. Really? No way. Damn. Only Lu Qianni thought. Then Lu Jing and the others. Only then did the others remember that there were still a few teammates outside. They immediately turned to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at them and then closed her eyes. She found that the lightning outside had dispersed a lot, and the bombardment was not as concentrated as before. She quickly made a few signs to Xiadong, and then immediately disappeared from the spot. Some of Lu Tianni's side understood Lin Xiao's sign language, but some didn't. For example, Kong Qingming and Huang Shou understood because both of them had been in the army. As for the army, Kong Qingming's brother used to be a scout. Every time he returned home, he taught him a lot of things about the army. Kong Qingming was also very smart. Since young, he had learned a lot of military skills from his brother. Especially like his brother, he was very sensitive to reconnaissance. So after the apocalypse, he, who had lost his family, had been in charge of intelligence since he came to the base. Huang Shou had joined the army for less than a year before the apocalypse, so he didn't understand much because he wasn't in the special forces. Not to mention the others, before the apocalypse, they were ordinary university students or young people who went out to work in their early years. Therefore, apart from Xiadong, Kong Qingming was the only one who could understand what was going on. As for Huang Shou, he only knew that it should be the sign language of a certain army, but he couldn't figure out what it meant. Chapter 202. After Lin Xiao left, Lu Tianni immediately looked at Kong Qingming. Huang Shou immediately looked at Xiadong. What do you mean? Did she go out to save someone? Huang Shou anxiously looked at Xiadong and asked. Xiadong looked at Kong Qingming and knew that Kong Qingming understood. Kong Qingming said, she told us to wait here and she'll think of a way to save someone. But she's not sure how much she can save. Huang Shou turned his head to look at Xiadong and saw him nod. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. But soon Xiadong noticed that Lu Tianni and Kong Qingming were looking at him strangely. Although he didn't understand the meaning of their gazes. Only Lu Tianni and Kong Qingming knew that they actually wanted to ask this man if he knew that person was a zombie, but what kind of mentality did he use to follow her? And what kind of gaze did he use to look at her? After Lin Xiao flashed out, she immediately turned invisible and jumped to the side. Then she rolled on the ground and narrowly avoided the lightning that almost hit her. As soon as she appeared, the zombie king instantly sensed her position. Fortunately, her reaction was extremely fast. Lin Xiao rolled to the side and stopped. Immediately, a lightning flashed down and was about to hit her. She hurriedly rolled on the ground again and directly rolled to the other side. Lin Xiao knew that this was just a random attack from the zombie king. He didn't know that she was there. After rolling on the ground, she straightened her body and nimbly jumped up from the ground. Then she dodged the lightning that occasionally fell from the sky, and turned around to rush out of the lightning circle. The zombie king's lightning was just randomly striking without any pattern. So Lin Xiao could only closely watch the movement above her head, and then choose the direction under her feet. But this wasn't a difficult thing for her. After a few turns, she was a few meters away. Then she dodged the lightning that fell from above her head and ran forward. Roar, roar, roar. The zombie king seemed to have realized that it didn't have any effect. Suddenly it roared a few times towards the sky. The sound was loud and long. Hearing this sound, Lin Xiao knew that it wasn't good. This guy was starting to summon a large number of zombies. If those zombies came back, those people would be in danger. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao immediately sped up and rushed in the direction of Lu Jing and the others. On the other hand, Lu Ying and the others were fleeing frantically in the direction of the Zombie King. However, before they could get far, the Zombie King stopped them. Suddenly, a low rumbling sound of thunder resounded above their heads. Raising his head, he saw a blinding flash of lightning descending from the sky. The few of them were instantly dumbfounded. Were they all going to be annihilated? The few of them immediately cursed in their hearts. Why didn't you inform us in advance before you used such a powerful move? However, the current situation did not allow them to curse. They immediately shouted and rushed into the surrounding houses. Hide! Fortunately, although there were many lightning bolts, they covered a large area. However, the power of the attack only shattered the glass on the windows, and the walls of the house were still very sturdy, although a lot of cement blocks were chopped off. However, as the 5 of them hid in the first floor of the building, they would not be struck by the lightning for the time being. Of course, the building would not collapse. Lu Jing and the others who successfully hid in the house, although they avoided being struck by lightning, they were still trapped in the house and could not get out. Looking at the lightning and thunder outside, there was a series of explosions. The few of them said with a gloomy face, "Where did this lightning come from? Don't tell me it's really that strange zombies doing?" The few of them saw the purple lightning surrounding the tall Zombie King, and they all guessed that it was a lightning type. I think it should be. What the hell is that? Even a level 5 zombie wouldn't be so exaggerated. Did that big sister start a fight with it? This skill is too awesome. Damn. It's almost the same size as our base's purple thunder leader. Let's not care about what the hell it is. Let's think about how to get out of here. I feel that we are still too close to it. This is too dangerous. But we can't get out now. I don't know how long this lightning array will last. The few of them still knew that they could only use their abilities to release energy, and they would not be able to last for long. Therefore, they were waiting for the lightning to disappear after a while, and then they rushed out. However, they had to wait for several minutes. The periphery of the lightning array was gone, but Lu Jing's position was not too far away, and they were stuck in the shrinking lightning circle of the Zombie King. Look, the area of the lightning seems to be shrinking. Lu Jing looked out from the broken window and found that the lightning on the other side was disappearing, and the other side was still randomly striking. We can't get out. Looking at it, there is a distance of 2 meters to get there. The others came over and looked at the place where the lightning disappeared, and where the lightning continued to fall. There was a distance of 2 meters between them and the building they were currently in. If they wanted to go through it, they would have to go out of the house, or along the eaves or corridors on the side. If they wanted to go out along the eaves or corridor, they would still be exposed to the violent lightning. Wait! But at this time, they suddenly heard a loud roar, and the sound was long and drawn out. What's that sound? The sound of zombies? This sound seems a bit different. Sure enough, after waiting for less than a minute, suddenly a person pointed outside the boundary and said in surprise, "Look, that is..." The others turned their heads and saw a large number of zombies coming towards them in a densely packed manner. At first glance, there were zombies everywhere. How could there suddenly be so many zombies? I know it should be because of the roar just now. The number is too many. What should we do? Even if we can get out of this lightning area, we will only be torn apart by the zombies. Looking at the sudden appearance of a large number of zombies, they were numb with despair. One of them lowered his head, leaned against the wall, and slid to the ground. He said with empty eyes, "It's over, we still can't escape today. We thought that if we were saved from the 3 level 5 zombies, we might be able to go back safely. But now the situation..." The others were silent. Yes, if they went out now, they would either be struck by lightning or eaten by zombies. They had no third way to choose at this time. Why it has to be us? At this time, a person suddenly muttered to himself. The others were puzzled and looked at him blankly. They heard him continue to murmur, "Why it has to leave us outside? Why didn't it pull us into the space?" Chapter 203. Hearing the man's words, the others all felt that they were unlucky and had bad luck. Lu Jing opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. It couldn't be helped. It was normal to have negative emotions in such a situation. At this time another person said, "Will be us. It's better for us to die than for others to die. Anyway, if someone has to die here today, it doesn't matter to me. If we can go back alive, we'll just treat it as an extra life." At this time a hoarse voice suddenly interrupted. "What two? Where did two come from?" The five of them didn't react at first and replied without thinking. But after 3 or 4 seconds they suddenly seemed to wake up. They raised their heads and looked at the door. They didn't know when, but there was a person standing there. Under the military singlet was a slender waist. Even though she was wearing loose camouflage pants, it still showed her slender legs. She wore a pair of military boots, and a camouflage jacket was tied to her shoulders. She wore a hat and sunglasses. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked at them indifferently under the brim of the hat. "Big sister." Lu Jing was the first to react. He suddenly jumped towards Lin Xiao excitedly. He cried, "Big sister, you're here. We thought we were going to die again." Lin Xiao slightly dodged to the side and calmly dodged the kid's pounce. "I'm not familiar with you. Don't hug me so passionately. Why is a man crying? Damn it." The others looked at her in shock. The man who was emitting strong dark emotions just now also stood up. Lin Xiao raised her hand and extended 2 fingers. She said, "No lives." When she finished speaking, the others had already recovered. It felt like they were on a roller coaster. They fell down and then flew up again. The few people who were in despair just now looked at Lin Xiao and were about to pounce on her. Well, one of them had already pounced on her. They called Lin Xiao Big Sister mainly because they weren't that old. The oldest was only 25 years old. Before the apocalypse, they were just ordinary university students. The others were just high school students before the apocalypse. Right now, he was around 21 or 22. After witnessing De Chao's powerful abilities and the fact that she could save them, they could even call her grandma now. After listening to Lin Xiao's slow words, they finally calmed down a little. The older one was called Zheng Xiaonian. Although his name was a little cute, he was a calm young man. Zheng Xiaonian stared at Lin Xiao and said, "2 lives. I owe you. I'll follow you from now on. Boss Lu doesn't want it anymore." Lin Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hand at him. He said, "Don't say first. Your boss is still in my space. Is it really okay to betray me so blatantly?" As she thought about it, she reached out and pulled Lu Jing, who was next to her, and Zheng Xiaonian, who was closest to her, into her space. Then, in the next second, it flashed out again and continued to drag the others in. As soon as he saw Lu Tianyi and the others, Lu Jing immediately flew towards them. "Captain!" "Woo woo woo." Lu Tianyi and the others did not dodge, but stood there and caught him. Lu Jing was actually not very old, so although his mind had matured a lot after the doomsday, but he still relied on his boss a lot. Lu Tianyi hugged Lu Jing and patted his back to calm him down. He knew that they must have been brought in at a critical moment, so he expressed his understanding. He turned his head to look at Lin Xiao and wanted to say thank you. In the end, he saw Lin Xiao walk to the bucket next to the stove. Lin Xiao opened the lid of the bucket and took the ladle and handed it in their direction. She said, "Come drink." Xiedong walked to her side and looked at the others. Huang Shou looked at Xiedong and then at Lin Xiao. He said, "Do you want us all to drink?" Lin Xiao nodded to him and then turned to look at Lu Tianyi. Lu Tianyi hesitated. He and Kong Qingming looked at each other. Because they just knew that Lin Xiao was already a zombie, they were afraid that there was something in the water now. The same thought flashed through Kong Qingming's mind. However, the others didn't care about this. As soon as they saw the water, they all rushed over. They didn't think that much. When Huang Shou and the others came in and saw a lake, they wanted to directly rush over and drink it. But they were stopped by their captain and vice-captain. They thought that it was impolite to drink the water from someone else's lake because the owner wasn't here. So they held back and didn't ask much. Now that the owner said to drink it, they didn't care about their boss anymore. Sigh. Seeing them rush in front of Lin Xiao, they grabbed the ladle in her hand and scooped the water into the bucket and drank it. Lu Tianyi stretched out his hand, but he didn't say anything. Seeing Huang Shou drink more than half of the water in one breath, he thought about how he had eaten the mutated strawberries she gave him before. Although he was still fine, he sighed. Huang Shou drank a belly full of water, and then handed the ladle to the others. At this time he remembered to ask Lu Jing, by the way, what happened outside? What happened? Although Lin Xiao told them that there was a level 6 zombie king outside, they didn't want to believe it. But thinking about where they were, it was normal for there to be a zombie king. Anyway, there were only so many level 5 zombie leaders. Lu Jing looked at Lin Xiao and said, it seems to be a level 6 zombie. Lightning type. The place where we just came in within 100 square meters was blasted into pieces by lightning. We just rushed into the hall on the first floor of a building, otherwise, we would have been blasted into charcoal. After saying that, he stared at the water in the bucket and watched the others drinking happily. He couldn't help but push Huang Shou away and move closer. When Huang Shou heard that there was really a level 6 zombie, he was also stunned. Then he looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. Level 6, it was said that it was already a zombie king and everyone called it a king. Its strength was not ordinary, and basically if a level 6 human paranormal met it, they would probably be beaten to death or crippled. Unless it was someone at the level of their base's leader. And it was lightning type, so how strong was it? Then the question was, how did this big sister go out and save them from the legendary zombie king? At this time Zhang Xiaonian also came over and said, and in the places where there is no lightning there are a lot of zombies. We were originally trapped in the building and couldn't get out, but if we went out we would be surrounded by zombies. What he meant was, if it wasn't for this mysterious big sister bringing them into the space, they probably would have died here. Chapter 204. Lu Qianni looked at Lin Xiao and suddenly asked, are you not a match for the level 6 zombie outside? Lin Xiao rolled her eyes under the sunglasses. Lu Qianni didn't know why, but he felt that she was looking at him with disdain. Thinking about it, it seemed to be true. If she could beat it, she wouldn't have to hide with them. However, to be able to rescue all of them was already very impressive. But there was another question, then what do we do now? Do we stay in your space until it leaves? Lin Xiao looked at the others who were still waiting in line for water, and walked to Xiaodong and patted him. Xiaodong looked at her and saw her pointing at the kitchen utensils on the other side. There were cups and bowls there. He nodded and immediately walked over. He understood what Lin Xiao meant. She wanted him to get more cups for these people to drink. Lin Xiao followed Xiaodong to the kitchen utensils area. She took a stainless steel plate and turned to Lu Qianni. Then she walked to the strawberry field. She didn't know if it was because of her space, but the strawberries were growing better and better. And there were a lot of new strawberries. It was not the strawberry season anymore. The batch of strawberries she brought from outside had already been picked. There were also some that were eaten by the rabbit and the mice. Lin Xiao walked over with the plate. She bent down to pick the ripe strawberries and put them on the plate. At the same time, she said to Lu Qianni, who was still 2 meters away from her, it holds a grudge. It will guard here. Listening to Lin Xiao's speaking speed, Lu Qianni guessed the second half of the sentence before she finished. Did it mean that the level 6 zombie king was going to guard this area? But why would it guard this area? And why would it hold a grudge? What grudge? Does it know that we are all in your space and then it knows that you are also in your space so it can't leave? Can it think of this? Lu Qianni asked with some confusion. Lin Xiao was squatting on the ground picking a strawberry. Hearing his question, she paused and then put the strawberry on the plate. She turned to look at him. Its intelligence, and it was just that its IQ might be higher than yours. It could think of everything that you could think of. Moreover, they all disappeared on the spot without any signs of leaving. It would also guess that Lin Xiao had a spatial ability. Lu Qianni. He turned his head to look at the other people who were about 20 meters away from him before turning back to ask her in a low voice, how did you die? Lin Xiao looked up at him and recalled Lu Qianni's memories before his death. I was knocked unconscious and thrown into a group of zombies. By the time she finished her sentence, she had already plucked several strawberries in her hands. Soon there were 15 or 16 large strawberries on the plate. She stood up and walked towards Xiaodong with the strawberry platter. Lu Qianni pondered over Lin Xiao's words. He was knocked unconscious and thrown into the group of zombies. Then how did she get knocked out? Did those people knock her out from behind? Or did they turn on her from below? All 3 of them were ability users and she was just an ordinary person. Even if it was a head-on fight, they could easily knock her down. But why was she knocked unconscious and thrown into the group of zombies? Why didn't they kill her before throwing her? If she didn't die and just fainted, then when she was torn apart and eaten by zombies, she would definitely wake up from the pain. When she woke up, she would find herself being torn apart and bitten by a large group of zombies. What a terrible scene that would be. Thinking of this, Lu Qianni looked at Lin Xiao's back with a complicated expression. But he wondered how Lin Xiao protected her sanity and became a zombie? Did she eat people when she first became a zombie? All kinds of questions hovered in Lu Qianni's mind. When Lin Xiao walked to the bucket, the people who had drunk enough water had already retreated to the side and sat down. She took the ladle from one of them, filled it with water, and poured all the strawberries on the plate into it. Then she handed it to them with the ladle and strawberries. Eat. After a while, they had almost noticed the strangeness in Lin Xiao's way of speaking and her voice. But they didn't ask. They just looked at the mutant strawberries in her ladle, which were 3 or 4 times larger than normal strawberries. Let them eat this mutant strawberry? No way. Lin Xiao looked at their eyes and nodded with certainty. Then she suddenly pointed to Lu Qianni, who was slowly walking over, and said, It is so, your boss is fine after eating it, what are you afraid of? When the others heard that their boss ate this mutant strawberry, they were all slightly shocked and turned to look at Lu Qianni. Boss, did you eat this? No way. Boss, why do you want to eat this? Boss, are you sure it's edible? Lu Qianni walked over and looked at them silently, then looked at Lin Xiao. He wasn't sure now, and he didn't do it willingly. He was half forced to eat it. At least he was fine now. They didn't know if this mutant strawberry really didn't have any toxicity, or if it was just hidden. Lin Xiao saw that they were afraid, so she didn't force them. Instead, she handed it to Xiaodong, who was next to her, and let him hold it. She shrugged her shoulders at the crowd, turned around, and sat down on a chair next to her. She didn't care if she ate it, she wasn't the one who was starving to death. Although everyone was surprised why Lin Xiao would give them mutant fruit, they had been starving for 2 days, so they calmed themselves down rationally. But their eyes were still intentionally or unintentionally looking at Xiaodong's hand. They looked at Lu Qianni's expression, hoping that he would say that he was fine. At the same time, they looked at Lu Qianni worriedly, not knowing if there were any changes in his body. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Qianni opened his mouth and said, I did eat a few, but I don't feel any changes in my body for the time being. As for 1 or 2 days, I'm not sure. Kong Qingming said, after experiments, you were directly bitten by zombies. When you become a zombie, it's 3 minutes after death. Before you die, it depends on the changes in your body. Those with weak bodies will die quickly and become zombies. The stronger the physique, the longer it would take. Everyone knows this. The others nodded, indicating that this was indeed common knowledge. Kong Qingming continued, as for eating mutant food or mutant animals, the time of transformation is uncertain. But this only depends on the length of time. In the end, you will still die and become zombies. In other words, as long as you eat plants or animals mutated by the virus, you can't escape the fate of becoming zombies. The only difference is the length of time. Some can die within 3 seconds after eating. Some can last 3 days, 30 days, or even 3 months. Chapter 205. Lin Xiao didn't want to argue with them, so she let them make their own decisions. She suddenly stood up and flashed out of the space. She thought it was time to leave this place. Although she really wanted to kill the zombie king outside, it was too powerful. And its skills were also very powerful. Her black mist was no longer effective against it. Her claws were also useless. However, it was still possible for him to slip away safely. She could leave this zombie king for Cho Lily to deal with, or the two of them could work together to deal with it. But she still needed to explore this uptown to see if there was a second zombie king in addition to this one. She also needed to check the downtown area. Lin Xiao came out of the space and was still in the lobby of the first floor of the building where she found Lu Jing and the others. She looked outside and found that the area of lightning had shrunk again. There was no lightning outside the building, but there were a lot of zombies outside. Suddenly, she turned her eyes and quickly went invisible again. Then she started to run upstairs. Just when she ran to the second floor, a tall figure rushed into the lobby of the first floor from outside the building. Lin Xiao looked back while running, thinking that this zombie king's senses were really sharp. She didn't expect it to rush over so quickly. She had only been here for 2 seconds and it had appeared so quickly. The zombie king rushed into the lobby of the first floor of the building with a wave of lightning. The lightning on its body shook and expanded. The entire hall was bombarded with explosions. Bang dash, however. The zombie king didn't know that Lin Xiao had already run to the top of the building. The zombies were all gathered on the ground downstairs. Looking down from the top of the building, there was a stretch of densely packed zombies for 1 kilometer. For Lin Xiao, who had gradually gotten used to running on the top of the building, this was not a problem at all. She turned a blind eye to the roaring zombies below and directly jumped from one building to another. Lin Xiao looked at the direction. She ran in one direction. Speaking of which, if she wanted to find a place with a lot of resources, she would need to find a special unit map. But it seemed that she had to go to the planning bureau to find it. So now the problem was, where was the planning bureau of Hangzhou City? Thinking of this, Lin Xiao suddenly stopped on the roof of a building. He silently looked at the people below rushing towards the direction of the zombie king with a face full of confusion. He took out the 2 atlases and quickly flipped through them. Sure enough, there was none. Holy shit. So where was she going to find the inside information from the planning bureau of Hangzhou? Thinking of how he had suddenly run around without a clue. This was simply Lin Xiao silently squatted on the edge of the roof and silently counted the zombie heads below. By the way, do the people in the space know about this problem? Sigh, this brain of hers. He didn't know if it was because he had become a zombie, but he felt that his memory and brain power were not enough. Sigh, my brain is broken, my brain is broken. After mourning for his brain for 2 seconds, Lin Xiao stood up. Looking at the zombies that were still gathering in the distance, Lin Xiao turned around and entered the space again. As soon as he entered the space, he saw that a group of people had moved to the place where the furniture was placed. A group of people sat in a circle on the sofa, staring at the big plate of washed strawberries in the middle of the table in the middle. Lin Xiao walked over and saw that no one was eating the plate of strawberries. She leaned over and stood beside them, looking at them. Seeing Lin Xiao suddenly appear, everyone turned their heads to look at her. After standing there for 2 seconds, she came in and picked up a strawberry. Then she put it in her mouth and ate it. The group of people looked at her silently as she finished the strawberry one bite after another. After Lin Xiao finished eating, she smacked her lips. There was a faint sour taste in her mouth. She suddenly touched her chin and wondered if the salt she ate now would be salty. The strawberry seemed to be sweet, but she only tasted sour. The others stared at her blankly, not blinking at all. Lin Xiao stared at them for 2 seconds in bewilderment. Then he was infected by their blank expressions. Only Xiedong's face was expressionless. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming were looking at her strangely. Although their expressions were a bit different, the 3 of them were thinking the same thing. As a zombie, why the hell are you eating strawberries? Also, don't smack your lips after eating. Lin Xiao was so close to them, of course she could feel their thoughts. She silently glanced at Xiedong and Lu Tianyi. Then she pointed at the strawberry and asked the others, "Not eating?" Everyone shook their heads. But as they shook their heads, they swallowed their saliva. Originally, when none of them took the strawberries to eat, they could still silently control their appetites. But now seeing Lin Xiao eating noisily in front of them, they were a bit tempted. At this time, Xiedong finally couldn't stand it anymore. He turned around and found that Lin Xiao's writing board was on another table. So he walked over and picked it up. Then he walked back and stood in front of everyone. He took out a marker and wrote, "Eat, it's really okay." There was a little girl who ate for many days and now she's okay. In fact, he didn't know the last sentence he wrote. Because he hadn't seen the leader's little princess, he didn't know what her current situation was. But since Lin Xiao said it was okay, then it must be okay. Then it must be fine. Besides, she had no reason to harm these people. As for why she specifically came to save these people, Xiedong expressed that he also didn't understand. After the others saw Xiedong's words, they were a bit impatient. The first was Huang Shou. Under the torture of hunger, he chose to believe Xiedong and Lin Xiao. Anyway, if he didn't get bitten to death by zombies outside, he would starve to death. He sat up straight and said, I choose to die of hunger. If I can't get out, I can't find food to eat. If I go out and still get eaten by zombies, then I might as well die comfortably." Lin Xiao rolled his eyes and crossed his arms in front of his chest. "Who wants you to die? If I want you to die, Then why did I spend so much effort to save you? Xiadong rolled his eyes at him and wrote on the writing board. Idiot, if I want you to die. Why did I spend so much effort to save you? Huang Shou glanced at his words and was stunned for a moment. Then he said in a daze, right? If that's the case, then there's no problem with the strawberries. After saying that, he took a deep breath and reached out his hand. Just when he was about to touch the strawberries, he slightly paused. Then he abruptly picked one up. He gently pinched it with his fingers. It felt like an ordinary strawberry. It was just a little bigger. He looked at the strawberry and then looked up at the others. He found that the others were closely staring at him. Under everyone's gazes, he slowly stuffed the strawberry into his mouth. When he opened his mouth and was about to take a bite, he suddenly took it out again. He was very speechless and said to the others, "Why are you looking at me like that? Even if you want to know what it tastes like, shouldn't you ask the boss? Didn't he eat already?" After saying that, he pointed at Lu Tianyi. Lu Tianyi. Chapter 206. Everyone's eyes immediately turned from Huang Shou to Lu Tianyi's face. Lu Tianyi was stunned for a moment before he smiled faintly and said, "It's delicious, sweet and refreshing. If you're not afraid of mutation, eat it." At this time, Huang Shou had already taken a bite of the strawberry and carefully chewed twice. Only then did he realize that the taste was really good. He finished one bite in a few bites and continued with the next. Seeing that Huang Shou was the first to start eating, the others didn't care so much. Each of them took one and put it into their mouths. Seeing that they had finished eating, Lin Xiao walked over to Xiadong. She took the writing board from his hand and wrote a sentence. Does anyone know which district the Hangzhou City Planning Bureau is located in? She showed it to Xiadong first, and Xiadong shook his head after looking at it, indicating that he did not know. Lin Xiao sighed. How good it would be if he could still use his phone or computer at this time. Wouldn't he be able to find out where he was just by searching on the internet? But without the internet, they didn't have a detailed map, and the GPS in the car was useless. What to do? She turned the clipboard to the group, who were eating strawberries, and tapped it with her pen. When the others heard the noise, they immediately turned to look at her. Planning Bureau? What are you doing there? Lin Xiao wrote again. Does anyone know? The crowd shook their heads, indicating that none of them were from Zhejiang province, let alone Hangzhou. Therefore, he did not know the address of such a state agency. Lin Xiao sighed in disappointment and threw the writing board to Xiadong. At this time, Kong Qingming, who had been watching her all this time, opened his mouth and said, "In the West Lake District. But you'll have to find the way yourself." Lin Xiao turned his head abruptly and looked at him. West Lake District? Wasn't that the direction they came from? Kong Qingming said, "I remember it's over there. I heard it from a friend before. That's why I remember him." Lin Xiao touched her chin. This meant that they had to go back to the West Lake District to look for the Planning Bureau. He didn't know if any of the files had been preserved. It would be best if it hadn't been damaged. Thinking of this, she turned to Xiadong and nodded. Xiadong understood what she meant and wrote on the writing board. Then we'll go to West Lake for the time being. By the time we find what we're looking for, you'll have more or less recovered. Wait until your battle prowess returns to normal before you leave. Lu Tianyi looked at Lin Xiao. He actually had a lot of questions to ask her. However, Lin Xiao didn't give him time. He turned around and went out again. Standing on top of the building, Lin Xiao looked down at the large number of zombies. Lin Xiao could only make a trip to the West Lake District. She knew that Kong Qingming was not lying because she could sense it. At this time, Wu Chengyue and the others who had just come from Shaoshan District discovered a strange phenomenon as soon as they entered Binjiang District. The surrounding ordinary zombies all walked towards the direction of the uptown. Strangely, these zombies ignored their convoy. Although their tanks were still very sturdy, hearing the sound of the vehicles would still attract a large number of zombies. However, this time these zombies ignored them. He swaggered towards the direction of uptown. It just so happened that Wu Chengyue was also going to uptown. He stopped the motorcade on a provincial highway at the junction of Binjiang District and uptown. Then, he went to the upper city. Xiao Yunlong and Meng Yu were guarding Wu Yueling outside, waiting for him to return. Wu Chengyue's plan was to take care of the level 6 zombie in the upper city. and then bring them to look for supplies. However, after entering uptown, Wu Chongyue felt that something was wrong. He flashed to the top of a building, and then looked at the surrounding zombies as if they were going to a market. After carefully sensing that direction, Wu Chongyue discovered that there was a faint lightning energy coming from that direction. Moreover, the sky over there was dark and gloomy. Seeing this phenomenon, Wu Chongyue knew that it was what he was looking for this time. His slender figure flashed at the edge of the roof and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was less than 500 meters away from the Zombie King. He retracted his aura and looked down from the corner of a building. What was going on? The ground below was filled with densely packed zombies, and on the opposite side, 500 meters away from him, there was a place where there was lightning falling from the sky from time to time. Wu Qingyue's handsome face was full of doubt, and he moved forward another 200 meters. The reason why he was puzzled was because these zombies looked like they were summoned from the outside. The question was, why did the Zombie King suddenly summon so many ordinary zombies to surround this area? The further they went, the denser the zombie horde became. Their voices gradually became softer and softer. When he arrived here, he also felt the violent aura. A strong sense of oppression could be felt. Even a level 7 arcanist like him could feel the pressure. He was sure that the place where the lightning struck was the Zombie King. But why was this Zombie King's aura so violent? He really came at the wrong time. That Zombie King must have been provoked by something. That was why he was so furious. As he thought about it, he continued to approach the Zombie King. When he was about 200 meters away, Wu Chongyue stopped on a relatively tall building. He took out his binoculars and looked at the place where the lightning flashed. When he looked, he saw something. A humanoid figure over 2 meters tall was bumping around on the road. Its whole body was dripping with blood, as if someone had peeled off a layer of skin. He could only see the dark red and purple flesh, and even the bones on its back. The head was also badly mutilated, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He could only see 2 purple eyes staring fiercely. Its mouth was also wide open, and it seemed to be roaring. The entire zombie state looked very crazy. If anyone were to provoke it at this time, they would either be blasted into pieces by the lightning or torn to shreds by it. Wu Chongyue looked at the Zombie King that was like a mad bull, bumping around. Seemed to be looking for something. One moment it would crash into the shop, and the next moment it would crash out of the window. The next moment it would rush into another room, and the next moment it would jump down from the balcony of the second floor. Or it would jump up and down from the rooftop. Wu Chongyue silently thought, what kind of medicine did this Zombie King eat? Why is it so violent? Just as he was observing the Zombie King through the binoculars, he suddenly saw the Zombie King stop. Then, when she turned around, her gaze actually met his. Not good. I've been discovered. Wu Chongyue took the binoculars down and looked at the direction of the Zombie King with a serious expression. Then he turned around and quickly left the place. Rumble, when he flashed to the rooftop of another building 20 meters away. The building he was in was blasted by several thigh-thick lightning bolts. Chapter 207. Wu Chongyue only had time to take a look and suddenly took a step back. He reached out with one hand and swung it downwards. A purple lightning bolt as thick as a thigh struck down from the sky. Although Wu Chongyue's lightning bolt was only one, it was accurately aimed at the large zombie that suddenly appeared and rushed towards him. The Zombie King was rushing towards Wu Chongyue, but it suddenly looked up and found that a lightning bolt was actually coming towards its head. It let out a furious roar and flipped in midair before flying off in a strange direction. Puff, bang, dash, the Zombie King fell on the wall of a nearby building. Its hands and feet left deep marks on the wall. Then it suddenly stepped on the wall and rushed towards Wu Chongyue's direction. Roar dash, the Zombie King's speed was very fast. In a flash, it appeared behind Wu Chongyue. Its claws carried a lightning bolt as it clawed towards Wu Chongyue. Furthermore, the lightning in its hand turned into several electric claws that quickly extended and enlarged. Then it swung towards the retreating Wu Chongyue. While Wu Chongyue was retreating, he also waved his hand towards the Zombie King. A lightning bolt also blasted towards it. The Zombie King didn't dodge. Instead, it let Wu Chongyue's lightning bolt hit its body. It forcefully waved another lightning claw towards Wu Chongyue. Rumble dash. In addition to Wu Chongyue's lightning bolt, the Zombie King also released a large number of lightning bolts. Bolts of lightning as thick as thighs shrouded it and Wu Chongyue in a circle without distinguishing between friend and foe, and then bombarded them with all their might. Wu Chongyue's face sank. He quickly flipped in the air and then fell towards the group of zombies on the ground. Then he stepped on the zombies' heads and leaped to the side. The ordinary zombies on the ground didn't know what was going on. When they felt Wu Chongyue's aura above their heads, they raised their hands to grab him. Wu Chongyue had already moved to another position. Wu Chongyue flashed to the balcony of a building and quickly hid inside. The Zombie King was blasted by Wu Chongyue's lightning, but it was still fine as it rushed out of the lightning smoke. It was just that his entire body had turned from a bloody mess to charcoal. However, to the Zombie King it didn't seem to affect it at all. Just looked a little ugly. Wu Chongyue suddenly appeared on the roof of another building and waved his hands at the same time. A few thick bolts of lightning blasted towards the Zombie King. Both of them were of the same element, but Wu Chongyue, who was a level 7, seemed to be at a disadvantage. It was as if he was being chased and attacked by a Zombie King. However, when the Zombie King's attack landed on Wu Chongyue, he was able to easily dodge it. At this moment, several bolts of lightning fell towards the Zombie King. The Zombie King only paused for a moment and looked up. He didn't care and continued to rush in Wu Chongyue's direction. But very quickly, the lightning suddenly made a slight turn in the air and blasted towards it. The first one chased after it and the second and third behind it also turned. Suddenly sensing danger, the Zombie King turned around and waved its hand. A few lightning claws were thrown out. The lightning clashed with Wu Chongyue's. Kacha. Bang rumble. Soon, the Zombie King's lightning claws were shattered by Wu Chongyue's continuous lightning attacks. Wu Chongyue could see that although the Zombie King's attacks were powerful, it was just a random bombardment. However, it was just a random bombardment without any sort of plan in mind. This kind of random bombardment was easy to deal with. Moreover, it would consume a lot of energy. When the Zombie King turned around to deal with Wu Chongyue's lightning attacks, Wu Chongyue suddenly grabbed towards the Zombie King. It was as if he was grabbing the Zombie King between his palms. Then the Zombie King's body was slowly connected to an electric tennis ball, wrapping it inside. Roar! The Zombie King's lightning claws were only effective against the first lightning, but it couldn't block the subsequent lightning attacks. Bang! 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 Boom! The Zombie King was bombarded again, and then Wu Chongyue's electric tennis ball appeared. The Zombie King, who had been bombarded by the lightning, was dumbfounded. It thought that these lightning bolts were as powerful as Wu Chongyue's previous one. It wouldn't do much harm to itself. But he didn't expect the power of the latter few to be several times stronger than the first one. Therefore, due to the Zombie King's carelessness, it was hit head-on. Wu Chongyue watched as the Zombie King fell to the ground, emitting black smoke. He waved his hand, and the electric tennis ball immediately shrank inward. He followed it and fell down. Bang dash, the Zombie King smashed into the group of zombies on the ground, instantly killing a few zombies. Then he raised his head to the sky and roared. There was a loud noise. They roared and became restless. Moreover, they all rushed towards the building where Wu Chongyue was, and then began to climb up to the top of the building to form a zombie tower. Roar! The Zombie King struggled in the electric tennis ball while roaring again and again. Then the surrounding zombies went crazy. Their movements were all desperately climbing up the stairs, one after another. Wu Chongyue glanced at the dense group of zombies climbing up like ants. Then he turned around and disappeared. At this time the Zombie King suddenly roared. Roar dash, then he saw the electric tennis ball that was binding its body suddenly explode, forcibly using the energy in its body to break it. After the electric tennis ball broke, the Zombie King turned around and jumped out. But this time it didn't jump towards Wu Chongyue. Instead, it jumped in the opposite direction at a faster speed. In just a blink of an eye it disappeared. Wu Chongyue smiled and squinted his eyes. Then he quickly followed it. Want to run? How could it be so easy? It was originally coming for you. However, the direction in which the Zombie King escaped was in the direction of the Westlake District. At this time Lin Xiao, who had already reached the Westlake District, was looking for relevant maps in various bookstores. At the very least he had to find a map of the Westlake District first. Even if he knew that the planning bureau was in the Westlake district, he didn't know which road or which location it was. It wasn't easy to do. Chapter 208. Lin Xiao appeared on the roof of a building that was tens of stories high. She sat on the edge of the building. Her legs dangling outside. There were a few people standing behind her. Xiedong, Lu Tianyi, Kong Qingming, and Huang Shou were all released. Lin Xiao held a map in her hand and looked at the road signs downstairs. The people behind her were also looking for the location of the planning bureau on a map. We've already searched this place. There's nothing. Kong Qingming crossed the place where Lin Xiao had led them to. They looked up at the back of Lin Xiao's head and asked, "Which way should we go next?" Lin Xiao turned around and glanced at them. Then she stretched out a hand and pointed at a place near the downtown area on the map next to the cross. She indicated that this was the place they should look for next. This way. There's a park here. What park? There are several parks along the way. Who cares what park it is? Just remember not to get close. Lin Xiao looked back at her map. She didn't know what kind of mutated things were in the Westlake district, and there were many botanical parks around. Maybe he could go look for mutated plants and pick a few energy cores for little man. At this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly raised her head. She turned over and immediately stood up. She stared in the direction of the uptown area. What's wrong? The others saw her suddenly stand up and stand steadily in the corner of the building, looking in the direction of the uptown area. They all asked curiously. Lin Xiao turned her back to them and raised her hand to take off her glasses. She slightly narrowed her eyes, leaving only a hazy gap to look outside. Then she saw two balls of purple energy, one in front of the other, moving in her direction from afar, and they were quite fast. Lin Xiao opened her eyes and put on her glasses. Lu Tianyi, Kong Qingming, and Huang Shou were all staring at the area below Lin Xiao's head. The place where the ends of her hair should have been was bare, although it was covered by the hat. But the hat didn't cover the area where the neck and the cerebellum connected. The question was, why didn't they see any hair? Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming thought that Lin Xiao had wrapped her hair in the hat, so they didn't pay much attention at first. But after observing a few times, they suddenly found that there was no hair on the edge of Lin Xiao's hat. Even if his hair was completely wrapped up in the hat, there would still be a bit of it showing. Now that he took a closer look, why did it feel like he was bald? Or did she cut it short? Or did he shave his side? At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly turned around and jumped down from the guardrail. Then, he grabbed Lu Tianyi with one hand and Kong Qingming with the other, and the three of them disappeared at the same time. But soon Lin Xiao appeared again. What's wrong? Huang Shou, who was still outside, asked curiously. Lin Xiao looked back in the direction of uptown and said, "They're coming." Then, she brought Xiedong and Huang Shou into the space. Huang Shou, who had entered the space, asked inexplicably, "What's coming?" The others also looked at Lin Xiao curiously. Lin Xiao picked up the writing board and wrote, "The zombie king from the upper city is following us." No way. How did it know we were at Westlake? The others were shocked when they saw it. Lin Xiao wrote, "I don't know if it's chasing us, but it's indeed coming this way." She didn't tell them that in addition to the zombie king, there was also an unknown thing that came along. What was that? The energy was also purple, and it seemed to be stronger than the zombie king. Lin Xiao felt that the stronger energy seemed to have a vaguely familiar feeling to her. She should have seen it somewhere before. She looked back at the others. Ever since they were tempted by Lin Xiao to eat the strawberries, they consciously took some of the potatoes and pumpkins and cooked them on the stove by the lake. Then they all ate their fill. It seemed that even if they were to die, they should be full ghosts. Lin Xiao felt that they all thought so. She was clearly afraid of being infected by the virus in the mutated strawberries and turning into zombies, but she couldn't resist the torture of hunger. She closed her eyes and then flashed out of the space. After she came out, she opened her eyes. Standing in the original corner of the building, she looked in the direction she was looking at just now. Soon she saw a tall, dark figure rushing over. That's right, it was indeed the zombie king from before. But why did it look a little different from before? It was originally a bloody mess, but there were still muscles. And its whole body was blood red. Why did it become black-red now? And there was a burning smell coming from it. He was in quite a sorry state, and it seemed to be in a hurry to escape, and its attention was always on its back. Lin Xiao squatted on the edge of the building, hugging her knees with both hands, curiously looking at the zombie king that was constantly approaching her. As the zombie king moved, a large number of zombies on the ground also followed. Lin Xiao could also see a few level 5 zombies jumping on the roofs very quickly, and then they could also use their abilities to attack. Of course, there were also a lot of level 4 zombies, and the target of their attacks seemed to be the strong person chasing the zombie king from behind. Familiar feeling. Roar! The zombie king howled, and the surrounding zombies immediately blocked the person behind it. That's right, Lin Xiao could already feel that it was a person. And very strong, familiar energy, familiar lightning. If that wasn't Xiao Budian's father, who could it be? No wonder she felt that it was familiar from afar. She had been attacked once. Why was it not familiar? No wonder the zombie king wanted to escape. A level 6 zombie king against a level 7 lightning class metahuman. Looking at the situation now, there was indeed a gap between a level 6 zombie king and a level 7 metahuman. Looking at the ability attacks of those level 4 and 5 zombies, in the end they were all easily blocked by Wu Chongyue. Moreover, it did not affect his speed at all. And very quickly he caught up with the zombie king. Roar! Seeing that Wu Chongyue was getting closer, the zombie king also became anxious. The level 3 and 5 zombies behind saw that their ability attacks did not seem to have any effect on Wu Chongyue, and under the command of the zombie king. Suddenly, they did not care about their ability attacks, and all rushed to the rooftop, and then they flew towards the approaching Wu Chongyue. Since their abilities were not good, they prepared to fight. Lin Xiao watched with relish as those high-level zombies quickly rushed to the rooftop, and they all rushed towards the man without a care for their lives. Although these zombies were still accurately thrown by Wu Chongyue with a thunderball in each hand, the number of high-level zombies was increasing. While Wu Chongyue was flying, he glanced at the zombies on the ground. Then he casually waved at the zombie king a few hundred meters in front of him, and a huge thunderball smashed down on the zombie king. Chapter 209. Roar! Feeling the danger, the zombie king suddenly made a sharp turn and rushed towards Lin Xiao's direction. Boom! Wu Chongyue's lightning directly hit the ground and blasted a hole in the roof of a 2-story building. Lin Xiao looked at the 1-meter-wide hole that was blasted by Wu Chongyue's lightning. She couldn't help but think that the zombie king's lightning would at most break a corner of the building. However, looking at the zombie king that was about to rush towards her, Lin Xiao didn't have the mood to continue watching the battle. She turned over and directly fell down from the building. Then she suddenly kicked the wall with both of her legs. Then her whole body bounced out and jumped towards the roof of another building. Less than 5 seconds after Lin Xiao left the building, the zombie king jumped to the roof of the building she was on. Very quickly it leaped in another direction. Then not long after, a lightning ball hit the roof of the building. Boom! On the other side, Lin Xiao's side, that was close. The zombie king seemed to be anxious and suddenly turned around. It stretched out both of its hands towards Wu Chongyue. Rumble! The sky turned dark. Then, a large amount of lightning of different thicknesses fell on top of Wu Chongyue's head. In this situation, Wu Chongyue had no choice but to stop. He stood on a high-voltage pole. He looked up at the large amount of lightning falling on his head. Then he used both of his hands to prop up a lightning net. Then a large amount of lightning from the sky fell on his lightning net. Crackle, bang, bang. A series of loud noises sounded in the sky. The collision of energy caused the air in that area to turn into a chaotic wind. Sand and stones flew everywhere. Even the zombies on the ground were blown away. Although they were both lightning type, Wu Chongyue couldn't receive the zombie king's lightning. This was because the energy in the zombie king's lightning was controlled by the zombie king. It was violent and explosive. It couldn't fuse with the lightning it emitted. If it entered his body, it would only destroy his body. After the end of the world, metahumans all had this common problem. They could only absorb energy through energy cores. The other forms could not be absorbed at all, even if they were of the same element. Therefore, the so-called energy cores referred to the energy crystal cores, zombie cores, and the energy cores of mutated animals, plants. As Wu Chongyue paused, the zombie king turned around and fled in the direction of West Lake. Lin Xiao quietly followed behind the zombie king, wanting to see where it was going. Moreover, from the looks of it, Wu Chunghua doesn't seem to have any intentions of letting this zombie king go. It was the core of a level 6 zombie king, and it was of the lightning element. If Wu Chunghua let the zombie king go just like that, how stupid would he be? That man didn't look like a fool. Sure enough, Wu Chunghua quickly put up those lightning nets. He immediately turned around and charged towards the zombie king. Suddenly, he transformed into a human figure and rushed over. That speed was even faster than Lin Xiao. Moreover, his position was only 10 meters away from Lin Xiao. Both of them chased after the zombie king at the same time. Of course, only Lin Xiao saw Wu Chunghua, who was next to her. Wu Chunghua was completely unaware of her existence. The three of them were very fast, but they didn't feel anything. However, if an outsider saw them, they would only see three figures flashing in the direction of West Lake. However, they couldn't see clearly whether it was a person or a corpse or a man or a woman. Wu Chunghua looked at the increasing number of trees and suddenly had a premonition. He quickly waved his hand and instantly threw out another lightning net, covering the zombie king in front of him. Of course, the zombie king wasn't going to let the lightning net cover it, so it spun around. Then it turned around and dodged. One man and one corpse attacked again. Lin Xiao silently stopped on a signal tower at the side, crossed her arms and continued to watch the battle. Both of them were experts. Wherever they passed, the buildings and plants on the ground would be blasted into a mess by the lightning. Lin Xiao had been secretly following the two of them, watching them fight for 2 days and 2 nights without stopping. Although the zombie king looked a little weak, its body was very durable. On the contrary, its reaction was very sharp. No matter what attack Wu Chunghua used, it could dodge it. Because it had suffered a loss once, the zombie king was smart enough not to let Wu Chunghua's seemingly weak lightning strike its body. As Lin Xiao followed them, she would get hit from time to time, although she managed to dodge it in time. However, she had a motive for following them so closely. If Wu Chunghua had beaten the zombie king half to death and didn't have much combat power left, then she would have quietly made a move to stop him. That man would probably die of anger. Ha ha ha. Moreover, this person was a level 6 zombie core. She could give it to little man to level up. I wonder how far it can evolve. Could he repair her body or level her up again? Even if she didn't need it herself, the energy could be used to level up Xiedong and Junjun's abilities. Therefore, Lin Xiao had been following them, waiting for the fisherman to collect the zombies. However, Wu Chunghua didn't know that the zombie core that he had worked so hard to get was being watched by an invisible person. The zombie king didn't know either, except for this powerful human in front of him. Apart from the powerful human in front of it, the one that it had beaten away earlier was also watching it. Roar! At this moment, the zombie king's muscles were almost all struck by lightning. They were charred and fell from its body. Its muscles were also filled with energy. However, after being continuously struck by Wu Chunghua, the zombie king's movements were no longer as agile as before. The zombie king's movements were no longer as nimble as 2 days ago. Apart from its head, it had lost an arm and a hole in its waist. It had been running around in the park by the West Lake. If it hadn't known the location of the mutated plants and animals, and had cleverly used them to stall Wu Chunghua a few times, it would have been killed long ago. At this moment, Wu Chunghua was also in a sorry state. There were many cuts on his body. There were also a few thin scars on his handsome face. He was panting heavily as he stood on a sign in the park. On the grassland a dozen meters in front of him, the zombie king was crawling forward. Roar! The zombie king crawled weakly and kept roaring. Rumble! At this moment the sound of thunder resounded again. For the past 2 days this area had been filled with thunder. Many of the birds and beasts on this side were scared away. Wu Chunghua waved his hand and a huge lightning bolt struck down. It fiercely hit the zombie king's body. The zombie king immediately lay on the ground and stopped moving. Black smoke rose. However, Wu Chunghua didn't dare to go over now because he wasn't sure if the zombie king was really dead. However, because he didn't move, there was a sudden flow of air. Then, the zombie king's head was suddenly cut off by something and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Disappeared. Disappeared. Chapter 210. Wu Chunghua looked at the headless zombie king in confusion and blinked his eyes. Not there. He blinked again. Still not there. He raised his hand and rubbed his eyes, then closed his eyes and pinched the space between them. He opened his eyes again. Still not there. He flashed to the side of the Zombie King and kicked the Zombie King's almost skeletal body. He then squatted down to its neck and stretched out his hand to touch the neck that was cut open. But when he saw the thick black blood slowly flowing to the ground, he retracted his hand. Fuck. Even the usually smiling Wu Chongyue had a gloomy face at this moment. He couldn't help but curse. Anyone who spent 2 days tirelessly killing a boss monster and was left with a little bit of HP would suddenly be killed by a person who rushed out from the side. Suddenly, a person rushed out from the side and instantly killed him. Then all the treasures that fell to the ground became someone else's. Whoever wasn't angry stand up. And most importantly, the player who suddenly killed his monster was still invisible. He didn't even see the player's name. Didn't see. Meaning that he didn't recognize the player. Wu Chongyue stood up and took a few deep breaths, trying to calm his anger. Inhale. Inhale. Fuck. Inhale my ass. If there was a table here, it would have been smashed by Wu Chongyue already. Who the hell was it? If I find you, I will beat you to death. To be able to hide to this extent, even a level 7 metahuman like him didn't notice. And it was a space type. That's right, Wu Chongyue actually saw a figure flash beside the zombie's head. And then the zombie's head instantly disappeared. Although the opponent's speed and movements were really fast. But he still saw a figure. The opponent could actually appear invisible and then disappear again. Then there must be a space. Who the hell was it? To be able to do this, it must be at least a level 6 or level 7 metahuman. Otherwise, a metahuman below level 5 would not be able to escape his attention. Lin Xiao, who suddenly flashed into the space with the zombie head, did not look at anyone else. Instead, he stood by the lake and closed his eyes to observe Wu Chongyue's reaction. Then he raised the corner of his mouth. The others saw her stay outside for 2 days and suddenly came in. They all looked at her in surprise and curiosity. In the end, he saw that she was holding something black in her hand. He took a closer look. Oh my god. That's a zombie's head. Why does he look so familiar? Fuck. Isn't this the Zombie King's? In the end, it was Lu Jing who recognized the item in Lin Xiao's hand. Lin Xiao opened his eyes and looked at them with a smirk. Then, he lifted the head in front of him and suddenly stuck 2 fingers into the back of the head. Pooh, a soft sound rang out. Her fingers dug in like 2 steel fingers. Then Lin Xiao stirred it with his fingers before pulling it out. Between her 2 fingers was a purple crystal the size of a lychee. It flashed with a dazzling purple light. However, the crystal core still had some sticky brown dirt on it. Lin Xiao threw the Zombie King's head to the side, then took the zombie core and walked to the side of the bucket. He scooped up some water with a ladle and threw the corpse core into it. With a thud, the corpse core fell into the water. Then, the dirt that was originally stuck to it immediately dispersed in the water. No one noticed that there was a long vine in the lake climbing up to the shore. He quietly climbed up towards Lin Xiao's direction. The reason why Lin Xiao rushed down and cut off the Zombie King's head when Wu Chongyue couldn't move was because he wanted to bring it into the space. This was because she could sense that the Zombie King's aura had completely disappeared. It was completely dead. However, seeing that Wu Chongyue did not immediately approach the Zombie King's corpse, she knew that Wu Chongyue was not sure if the Zombie King was really dead. That was why she acted immediately. If they didn't act now, when would they? The level 6 corpse core that had been washed emitted a bright purple light. Very beautiful. The others rarely saw a corpse core of this color, so they all stared at it. Then he unconsciously leaned towards Lin Xiao. This light, it's so beautiful. If it was placed under the sun, it would be so dazzling. Is this a level 6 corpse core? I seem to have heard that the color of a level 6 corpse core is related to its ability. This one is purple, so it should be the color of the lightning element. Just when they thought that Lin Xiao would absorb the corpse core, Lin Xiao poured the dirty water in the ladle on the ground. After putting down the ladle, she walked to the side of the lake. Then just like that, she raised her hand and threw it into the lake. Ah! Hey! Damn, what's going on? Big sister, you can give it to me even if you don't want it. Why did you throw it into the lake? Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't understand why Lin Xiao didn't absorb the energy of the corpse core, but threw it into the lake. Lu Qianni ran to her side. His face filled with disbelief as he looked at the ripples in the lake that had been created by the corpse cores. He turned his head and looked at Lin Xiao as if she was crazy. Is your brain okay? Isn't that a level 6 zombie? Even if it's not level 6, level 5 is also very precious. If you don't want it, why don't you give it to us to exchange for supplies? Everyone else was dumbfounded. Kong Qingming raised his hand to cover his forehead. He suddenly couldn't understand what was going on with this Lu Tianyu who had turned into a zombie. Could it be that her brain was damaged when she turned into a zombie? Lin Xiao shrugged at them indifferently. Who said she didn't want it? Giving it to little man was also giving it to herself. Only Xiaodong looked at everyone's expressions with interest. He knew what was in this lake. Lin Xiao turned around to look at them and found that they were still dirty. There was a lake here, but they didn't go into the water. At most, they used the water in the bucket to cook and eat. Sure enough, men didn't care much about these things. She walked to the chair next to her, picked up her writing board and then wrote, "You guys take the bucket and get some water to wash. Don't you feel the stench on your bodies?" Lin Xiao felt that after drinking the lake water these 2 days, their physical condition had improved a little. She just didn't know if they realized it themselves. Maybe they only knew that their abilities were recovering. As for whether they found that their bodies felt a lot more comfortable. After seeing Lin Xiao's words, everyone's expression became a little awkward. Huang Shou said, "Big sister, we originally wanted to go into the lake to wash. But Xiaodong said that it's not safe in this lake and didn't let us go." Lin Xiao wrote, "Who let you go down? You just got a bucket to fill it with water to wash." Huang Shou, "Seems so. Why didn't I think of it at the time?" As he said this, he suddenly looked back at the others. At this time, Lu Qianni said, "If you didn't say anything, who would dare to do this? In case everyone stripped naked and took a bath. You suddenly ran in and saw everyone's jade bodies. Do you want to be responsible for marrying all of them back?" Chapter 211. Lin Xiao looked at Lu Tianni in surprise. This kid was actually in the mood to tease her. Besides, was her relationship with him that good? He only knew how to joke around. Besides, why wouldn't she dare to marry him? The problem was, would they dare to marry a zombie like her? Kong Qingming coughed lightly and said, "This is your space. You should know what we are doing." Lin Xiao nodded at him with the writing board and then wrote, "Afraid of me seeing?" She could tell that they had eaten and drunk enough. It must be a bit boring to stay here and not be able to go out. As soon as he saw Lin Xiao's name, Kong Qingming smiled. He had a devilish face to begin with, and when he smiled, he looked naughty. Most women wouldn't be able to control themselves when they saw his smile. Kong Qingming smiled with a bit of evil. "We are all men, are we afraid of being seen by a woman? It's not like we will lose a piece of meat." Lin Xiao wrote with a calm face, "If you're not afraid, go wash. Get naked and wash your clothes while you're at it." Lu Tianyu felt that something was wrong and suddenly asked, "Wait a minute. Isn't the zombie king dead? Can you let us out now? What have you been doing outside for the past 2 days?" Why did he sense from her tone that she was going to continue to put them there? This time Lin Xiao was embarrassed. She couldn't tell them that she had just stolen their leader's monster outside. If she let you out now, he will definitely sense it. And he will find them soon and ask them questions. At that time, wouldn't she be exposed? She thought for a moment and suddenly made up a story. There is still a level 6 zombie king outside. What? And, isn't there only one? As soon as they saw that there was another one outside, the others' expressions immediately changed. It can't be. And, one of them was already too much for them to handle. Why was there another one? Lu Jing's eyes turned and suddenly asked, "Big sister? Could it be that the 2 level 6 zombie kings were fighting, and then the zombie king killed the lightning one? In the end, you suddenly appeared out of nowhere and stole the fruits of others' labor." The way the others looked at Lin Xiao immediately changed. If that was the case, then wouldn't they be eaten alive by the beast outside? Lin Xiao was stunned. Then, he silently looked at Lu Jing. He couldn't help but admire this fellow's imagination. His imagination was actually similar to reality, although the roles were a little off. although the person she robbed was a human, not a zombie. However, if he were to go out now, he reckoned that his ending would not be too pleasant. She raised her hand and gave him a thumbs up. The others were speechless and said in unison, "No way. You've just provoked one, and now you're provoking another." Lin Xiao silently turned his head. But soon she shrugged at them indifferently and wrote, "What am I afraid of? I want to leave." No one knew. Even if it was Wu Chongyue outside, she could still leave silently if she wanted to. Outside, Wu Chongyue sat on a branch of a tall tree, quietly waiting with his eyes closed. He didn't believe that person wouldn't come out. Although he hadn't seen the other party's appearance, he had remembered the aura that the other party had exuded in that instant. And now, he had firmly committed it to memory. Wu Chongyue raised his perception to the maximum. As long as that person appeared within this 5 miles range, he would be able to sense it. But he didn't know that Xiao Yunlong and the others were still in the Binjiang district. This time there was trouble. A figure was approaching them. She was not tall, only about 1.45 meters, and her body was thin. This person looked to be only about 13 or 14 years old. She was a girl with short hair. Although her appearance still retained most of the characteristics of a human, her movements were somewhat abnormal. Moreover, half of her face was covered with strange scales, and her claws and feet that were not wearing shoes were covered with a layer of strange fine scales just like her face. A pair of eyes had no white, and a faint green color filled both of her eye sockets. But in the middle there was a pair of vertical eyes. They looked like snake eyes but somewhat different. The periphery of the eye sockets were thick black circles, like 2 panda eyes. She was wearing a clean school uniform, a white waist-tight shirt, and a black school skirt that reached to her knees. Under the skirt, a pair of smooth calves could be seen, but the flicker of scales could be faintly seen on her knees. A long tail emerged from the back of her skirt, swinging as she jumped on the tree. She did not wear shoes or socks and was barefoot. Even if she wanted to wear them, she couldn't, because the toes on the soles of her feet were bent forward. She had long curved, sharp nails. If her shoes were put on, they would probably burst. Although the girl looked strange and terrifying, her green eyes were full of confusion and dullness. It was filled with confusion and sluggishness. Apart from these two expressions, there was nothing else. Then the confusion and dullness in her eyes suddenly disappeared, turning into a kind of doubt and curiosity. Then the confusion and sluggishness in his eyes suddenly disappeared, turning into a kind of doubt and curiosity. The girl smiled and jumped down from the tree with some joy. The girl smiled and happily jumped down from the tree. She smelled a very fragrant smell. She remembered. There was a human smell on it, which meant that there were humans there. And among the smells, there were 2 very natural fragrances. Moreover, among those smells there were 2 very natural fragrances. Such a comfortable smell. Such a comfortable smell. She liked it. The further they went, the brighter the girl's eyes became. Not far ahead, Xiao Yunlong brought the crowd to camp in front of an abandoned residential area. After clearing the zombies in one of the buildings in the community, they found some rooms that could be used as a temporary resting place. After closing the door on the first floor, as long as there were no zombies upstairs, there was no need to worry too much. In any case, the zombies downstairs would not open the door, and would only randomly push and shove. There were several soldiers guarding the stairs inside the door, and 2 captains with more than a dozen soldiers guarded the corridor on the 2nd floor. It was the same on the 3rd floor. Then Xiao Yunlong carried Wu Yueling and Mengyu to find a clean room, and after a simple cleaning, he took Wu Yueling to stay inside. Xiao Yunlong felt it was amazing that the child was now willing to let him carry her. Was she finally willing to recognize him as her godfather? Then he was very happy these 2 days, and kept playing with Wu Yueling. "Let me have a look. Don't be so stingy. It's just a grass dragonfly, let Godfather take a look. Godfather will definitely weave a better one for you." Xiao Yunlong sat on one side, watching Wu Yueling on the other side, tightly tucking her little toy behind her. A pair of big round eyes stared at him vigilantly. Mengyu, who was at the side, was also weaving a few leaves of tender green grass, but she just couldn't weave a grass dragonfly like that. She played for a while, then threw it at Xiao Yunlong without interest. "Come, you slowly weave it. I can't make it."